To call to order the Hingham School Committee meeting of January 8th, 2018 at 7:32 p.m. Welcome. Happy New Year, everyone. First item on our agenda is approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting that was held on, it seems so long ago, December 4th, 2017.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next, questions and comments. Audience comments are always welcome as agenda items are discussed. The school committee has set aside 15 minutes on this agenda to enable members of the audience to raise questions and make comments on any matter of general concern that is not on the agenda tonight. Does anyone have anything for us? No? Okay. Move on to superintendent's report.
I would suggest that we skip over the superintendent's report, given the length of the agenda and the urgent nature of the other items.
Okay. Communications.
And similarly with respect to communications, in your packet, there are transition reports for the middle school and high school, and I think we'll be talking more about transition planning when we get to subcommittee reports. And the December into January facilities report is there as well for your information.
Okay.
Do we have a student not here?
No.
Tonight, okay.
And on communications, I know that Dr. Gallo received it, and I'll also receive from Representative Machino from the MSBA that the notification officially that window is open for statement of interest. We voted at our last meeting to pursue that, but just for the public, we will be pursuing that this spring. And I also forwarded to the committee, we received an email from Scott Sear, who's chair of the Green Committee. There's some proposals that may be coming forth at town meeting, and I've asked Ed and Long Range Planning to follow up with them on that. And you also all received an invitation from Nicole Piantes at the high school for the Impact Ability Training ceremony and celebration for some of our highest needs students. And if you have the time, I highly recommend that you go. I attended it last year, and it's quite inspirational to see what these students have accomplished. So make note of that email that you received. Okay, anything else, Dr. Gallo, on communications?
No.
Okay, so unfinished business, 6.1. To hear a proposal for full-day kindergarten fees for fiscal year 19 and act as appropriate. And we touched on this at our last meeting, and John, you prepared a proposal.
Right, yes, there's a letter in the package that proposes for full-day K to increase the fee by $75. And the, a past school committee, when we first implemented, had the view of eventually making full-day K a non-paid program. So, with that in mind, with no other direction, I decided that, about a 2%, we don't want to get that number too high, because if the number gets too high, it will become insurmountable over time for the town to actually provide funding for the program. So by proposing a $75 increase, which is approximately 2.09%, it would bring the tuition to $36.50, and that would generate approximately $17,000 of additional income.
Thank you. Do people have questions?
Could I just add, in terms of what you received, so you have a
Yeah.
number of items in your packet, and one of them was last year's fee, and John is going to have share some information with you about how the fees are calculated and the notion of revenue that comes in and where that comes from. This is in response to a question that I think Kay asked the last time around. But we also have just received the information that we get from the early childhood group, no longer under DESE, are the kindergarten discussions about fees because they no longer provide any money. But the early childhood group does keep up with the median family income information. We've been awaiting that in order to plan the fee for the coming year's kindergarten, which if you take a vote on a fee tonight, we would like to share with them tomorrow night, but certainly will be in the packet as things come forward. But we do have a draft for the coming year kindergarten, but the one you have in the packet is for this current year kindergarten.
So what I passed out was the calculation for the full day K offset. So basically, we're working, we're looking forward now to FY19. We really don't know what the enrollment is, so we need to make some enrollment assumption. The initial enrollment assumption that I made was 290 students for at fiscal 19. What you're seeing before you, there's they look the same, but they have different rates at the top, okay? So if you look at the one page where it says right at the top, 3575, which is the current tuition, okay? That's actual budget data for FY18, okay? If you look at the number of students that we had, it was 292 students, and it shows you the way they broke down into the pay scales, okay? So you can see how many numbers of each of those fell into each of those categories. Okay, and then, you know, the rate that it would be related to that category, full pay would be $35.75, 3/4 would be $26.81, and you can see the amount is extended across, okay? You know, in coming down, so you look at, there's a total of $818,000 that we actually learned would be generated in FY18. Of course, I think in the budget that I have for FY18, there's an $800,000 offset, right? It's very hard to sort of get it perfect, okay? Then if you look over to the column to the right, if more students enroll, let's say that 20 additional students enrolled, okay? Using FY18 budget data, just so you understand how the model works, okay? You'd have this much additional revenue generated, 68.5. Now, when you get 20 students enrolled, you need another section. So you're going to end up paying for another section anyhow, okay? So, but by and large, the vast majority of that section would really be covered by the tuition. Each section, you'd have to think there's a teacher that's going to be involved and a paraeducator that will be involved, okay? So actually, the combination between those two would probably run somewhere between, about $85,000. So if you look at the incremental revenue you'd be generating by 20 additional students, it would be about $68,500, yet the cost would actually be about $85,000. Now, down at the bottom below, okay, that looks at, FY18 budget data, and it shows you using average teacher pays, an average para pays, and the special education FTEs that we initially had added into the budget on an incremental basis to cover the full day K program. You see that there were 15 sections. This is what we have in 18, okay? So you can't do 19 yet because we don't know where we're going to be. So based on the model, we have 15 sections, with an average pay of about $84,000 for a teacher, okay? And the incremental portion of that is 0.5 because you had 0.5 going anyways, okay? Then with paraeducators, we had we have had inclusion paras that were already included in there. So we have 15 sections, and each section gets a paraeducator, but there were already some hours in the original budget when we implemented it, okay? So that's why you're looking, that's at .85. It's not a 1.0 there, it's a .85 because there were already existing hours. This .85 is the incremental portion of a paraeducator that would be related to a section. Okay? And then with special education, we had the initial plan was to have a .5 paraeducator at each one of the elementary schools. Okay? What we've been running on is 3 out of those 4 paraeducators at the elementary schools. So that's where that's translating to a .38. Okay? You have 4 of them, 4 at one of each school, but it's a .38. So you just go extending across, you see that the incremental cost in FY18, and keep in mind, this is general, right? This is just using averages. It's not specific. It isn't the exact cost of, $1,016,000 or $1,017,000. So that gives you an idea of what the incremental cost for the FY18 budget year is for full-day K. Now, if you turn the model, if you turn it over, you see this is where the new tuition is projected here at $36.50. Okay, and it goes through the similar calculations. So I don't have to go through I won't go through the explanation again, but happy to answer any questions about, so the offset, I have to figure out how much will we make? How much will we make? So we go through, how did the students break down last year? Last year I said, how did the students break down the year before? I've got nothing else to go by, but, this is the percentage of the way they broke down. So you assume if I have this many students, I'll say this many, I'll take the weighted average for each student, I'll extend it out, and I'll come up with a bottom line total for what I think the full-day K offset should be during the budget process. And, then when we get into the year, it could be a little higher, and could be a little less. You never know how it'll break out. But, we don't run that account down to zero anyways. We need to keep a buffer of a couple, $20,000 or so. So, that way we'd have that play. If we generated more this year, and we're only going to use 800,000, there's 18 there, but when we get into next year and we see where we're at, we might be able to use a few of those. So I'm happy to answer questions on calculations or, how the model works. So I said, as the $75 is about a 2.09%. If you want to think of it generally, think about 1% increase is worth about $8,500. Okay, 0.5% is going to be worth about $4,200. If you wanted to go above the 2.09.
So I have a kind of a basic question. Based on this year with the $35.75 tuition.
Yes.
So we're bringing in $818,675, but our incremental cost is $1,017,000.
Approximately.
Yes.
So we're
With assumptions about the average salary.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Right.
So we're supplementing the full-day program by $198,325.
It's averages. It's
Yeah,
obvious.
yeah.
The program costs more than what we are generating.
Charging?
Yes.
John, do you, and don't calculate it now, but off the top of your head, do you know what, to break even, to Liza's point, what the fee would be? Any clue? Any guess?
No, I don't know.
Higher than we'd want
the
to go.
3650 generates 905, but see, if you do that, right, every year it's going to go up anyways.
Right,
Okay, so these numbers will constantly move.
because the teacher salaries are going up.
Well, yeah, but say you need another section, okay, so this estimated cost, if you need another section, you got to add a section in there, right? So
But all
that
of
number's
the
going to
sections
grow.
being equal, it's going
Oh.
up because teacher salaries are increasing per the
All salaries are
contract.
increasing,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand, but was under the impression that we were breaking even.
Well, I mean, it's,
Well, we
And
did
we
the
may
fir-
have the first year, but then.
Well,
that
and we also
changed
had
the
a big
second-
enrollment in the first year.
A bigger
Yeah,
enrollment, so then we were
more
able to.
than- More than 300
Close,
students.
okay.
Right.
yeah, so what have we been operating, 2 years now? So this is the third year that we're sort of looking at now? You know, and as we, you know, it's averages, it's an average teacher pay, right? Elementary teachers are, you know, whether, it depends on how long they've been here. So it's not, you know, if you were going to model this, I did this, I said, okay, let me take the average pay, right? You hire new teachers, they may not be at these levels. So it's just a guide. You can't say, this is a verbatim, this is the truth, okay? It's just averages, because there's no other way to do it.
Well, the other things that will change are those percentages on the left about the students, about how many of them will be able to pay the full fee, about how many special ed children we have whose fees would be waived, about whether there are retentions that were desired by the parent. They're supposed to be paying the fee. Retentions that we recommended for a child, we're paying the fee. So all of those numbers vary from year to
Right.
year.
And we didn't have retentions the first year when we started, you know, I mean, you know, there's many moving parts in this, so all you can do really, I mean, when you look at it, is you can say generally, we're collecting this, and we're paying about this. And, you know, you look at that breakdown, Dot makes a very good point with the, you know, the non-paying categories, right? There's retentions that don't pay, there were no retentions when we first started.
Why are the salaries average? I mean, don't we know
Well, we
what we're
didn't have
paying
any
people
other
this
way
year?
to do it. I mean, we could have used the salaries of this year's
Right.
teachers,
But then.
but they're going to change, and somebody could leave. And, for example, right now, we have one kindergarten teacher who's out on a full year leave. We don't know what's going to happen. Will she come back? Will she not come back? Will somebody else go out? I think
Is it really?
we have somewhat of an urgency about getting a fee for next year, so we can't take forever to do this, but I've mentioned a number of times that philosophically, this committee may not be in the same place as the committee that said to me that, unanimous, I would say too, that we should develop a plan for funding, having the town fund this program over a longer term, maybe a 3 to 5 year plan. And the very first year that I was supposed to produce such a plan, it was clear that there was not any will among the school committee to want to embark on the first year of such a plan. So,
But if you take, so just as to answer your question more directly, if you take the one point, what is it?
1016.
1016
Yep.
and divide by 290, the tuition rate is actually 3506. So it drops. What you have to remember is that proportion of kids who
Right.
are either partial pay, non-pay, that makes up the
would
difference.
be
So we actually do
100%
break
pay,
even.
right.
We're actually, right, the rate, to take the total enrollment, divide by how much it costs to run the program, the tuition should be about 3506. It's not, right, because of the incremental increases, but if you pull out the kids who are non-pay or non-full pay, that's where the discrepancy begins.
Right.
So you could run the argument the other way of other parents supplementing other, so, you know what I mean? So it's, I
Right,
just
but we
be,
built the model of the rate, taking that into account.
but I'm answering
Yeah.
Cynthia's question,
Yeah,
right?
yes,
Her
thank
question
you.
was,
Yeah.
you take the 1.1, what does it look
Yeah.
like?
John,
Thank you.
do you know off the top of your head what the shortfall was for FY17?
Shortfall?
Well, your cost against your tuitions?
No, for full day K, no.
no, we didn't, but I think,
Last year, I
The
mean,
way-
in FY17. This is FY18.
this is
We-
the current year, right? So if your question was, do we know what happened at the end of the first year?
Yeah.
I think we were pretty much on target in that year. But, we just have to face the reality of, if you want a totally self-funded program, and you're using public school teachers who have a contract, we all know what the rate of increase of salaries is. So if the goal is that the town shouldn't support any part of this, even for children that may need a sliding scale, then I don't think we could ever charge a big enough tuition
No, I don't think.
over time. So it really is philosophically, where are you?
Yeah, I'm not there. I didn't realize there was a gap of the totals. I thought it was
Break even.
I thought it was break even with even
Well,
the
so
model we had.
It was a break-even program when it began,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
this is the first time I'm seeing new
Well,
calculations of, it's a different picture than what I had imagined.
and as you do the averages, those averages will go, could go up significantly next year, right?
Right.
This is FY18 averages, FY19 averages will be higher.
So knowing we have a gap, and we need to set something for next year.
Oh, go ahead, finish.
Well, do we want to just look at the adjustment as it is, accept the gap, or do we want to go back and recalculate the whole thing?
You have to remember, too, at the time that we did this and we set it up, we were receiving a state grant 2 years in a row, $86,000. The grant was not to fund staffing of the program, but it was to fund teaching materials, technology, support, training for teachers, setting up of the website, all those things, which we did do. But at that time, the Department of Education Division of Early Childhood was running the grant and said, if you're going to accept money from us, then you will use a sliding scale, and you will use one that reflects a cap of $4,000 for tuition, and that we would use the model for the sliding scale that reflected the median family income. So that department no longer has any money to give away. They're not there. There still is in the state an early childhood agency or group, and it's not just for public schools or school-age children or whatever. And they still provide the guidelines for what the sliding scale would be. And so there's a worksheet that you get, and you have the sliding scale, and you insert whatever our maximum tuition would be, and you then calculate the slide scale from there. We're not required to use that anymore. We're encouraged to, but we're not required to use that, and therefore there's no longer this cap that we have to observe. So just for full information.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm with you. I didn't realize there was a gap, but I understand why. And I don't think that, given the number of variables that we're looking at for next year, I don't think we're going to be able to come up with a number better than what John has to set a tuition, not knowing the enrollment. So I think we should just go with what John suggested.
I agree.
I have a little bit of a problem with what John suggested. First of all, he's going off the assumption that the school committee is for, or wanted pre-day kindergarten. My understanding was it was never voted on, and the school committee went ahead with the whole program because it's going to be funded by the parents. So I'm all for the sliding scale, but 2% strikes me as being extremely low, especially now that we can see that there's an apparent gap. And that gap's only going to grow if we are increasing our tuition by 2%.
Okay.
So there's two
could you
issues
go
really
back to
here.
the-
Is, we're a new school committee, you know, back when this was discussed, I believe it was just Ed and Liza that were involved in the discussion. So, you know, I guess it is, what direction do we want to go as a school committee now? And I think it would be helpful if we can set a precedent so that every year we know how we're going to calculate the increase. So that there is some kind of rhyme and reason to why we're choosing the number we're choosing, so that next year when we have this discussion, we know exactly why we increased it by how much, and not just to say, well, the school committee goal was to have free full-day kindergarten, which was set a couple of years ago.
Michelle?
My opinion is that I don't necessarily think that the school committee should decide what we want for the kindergarten. I think it should be a town-wide decision. What does the town want? Do we want funded full-day kindergarten, either funded by the town or funded by parents? Like, I don't feel like that's a decision just for us to make, because this committee changes and rolls over every couple of years. So I feel like it's more of a decision to be made town-wide. I don't know exactly how we do that, but that, to me, feels like the right thing, right? What do people in the town want? I mean, when you look at that map, I don't know if the map is up there, but it's fascinating that all of Western Massachusetts, free full-day kindergarten. All the Cape, free full-day kindergarten. It's actually shocking to me looking at that, the towns that are charging for full-day kindergarten. There's not that many. So I don't know how they do it, and how, I mean, Dot and Jamie and John might have more insight into that, and not necessarily for this meeting in
Right.
particular, but
Yeah.
just as we go forward, thinking
No,
about full-day
I mean, because
kindergarten.
there's a lot of historical information. You'd have to know how long have they offered it. and,
Yes.
There's so much that you need to know.
Right.
I think, actually, it's funny that you say that, because I have, from the planning board, demographic information about Hingham, and I think this is from their website, and it says, Hingham has the highest percent of people over 65 on the South Shore. So when you think about that, you know, who are our constituents, and who are the residents of Hingham? And we can go into further numbers. I
Yeah,
believe half of the
I think
residents are.
when we get to that point of whether we go with the full day, or funding full day, that's a socialization for the
But I think you need to discuss.
issue for the whole town. So I agree with you that what John brought up of, that was based on the decision of the school committee, that was an old school committee. I'm just looking at the percentage too, and based on our costs. Carlos, do you?
Yeah, so I want to say that I agree with Michelle that if there's any major change to take place, or should be listened to the community. I am in favor, actually, of the increase proposed by John. It's a fair increase, and still, in comparison to the towns nearby, we still have a pretty decent rate. At the last meeting, I did ask if any parents ever brought any concerns to our attention, and I heard that they had not. So I would be in favor of this increase. And then, you know, obviously, I'm totally in favor of having full-day kindergarten free of charge to all the parents. But is that doable? That's another question for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I agree with Michelle. I don't think we should be the ones to decide whether full-day kindergarten is free or not. I think there'd have to be some town-wide vote on that issue. Because I agree, we're just 7 people that are going to change. What if the next board says, we all say, oh yeah, it should be free, and then the next board says, oh no, it shouldn't, it changes back. It needs to be a bigger vote than us on that subject, in my opinion.
Right.
But I think that we have to increase it by something this year. Clearly, we're not going to be able, in all likelihood, we're not going to be able to continue to increase it the amount we need to increase it for it to stay a break even. So, okay, now we've offered full-day kindergarten, and we've got ourselves in a little bit of a pickle that's going to require a bigger discussion. But we have to set a fee for next year, and in fairness to parents, we need to do it sooner rather than later, so they know what they're going to pay. And maybe this isn't the perfect number, but I would agree, it's at least a starting point for this year, and this needs a broader discussion, but we've got to do something now. And so I would agree with what John has proposed for now, but with the caveat that it's only for this year that I'm saying this this increase and using this way of deciding the increase is good. It's a one-time Band-Aid, and there needs to be a bigger discussion and some sort of potentially even town-wide vote, whether full-day kindergarten will be funded by the town or not.
One of the other things that's important to know is that, so here's a list of local communities, and all of them were under the original, all of them got some sort of grants to get started with, so they were under the original cap of 4,000, which has gone away. But in fact, in a number of these communities, the state is actually paying because of the foundation budget and the way it works. So they count a full-day student as a full-day student, and we get more state aid under the foundation formula. So if, in fact, the foundation formula, even before the commission recommended full funding, if the foundation budget were fully funded by the state, we would get more credit for the number of kids that we have participating. And so in a number of communities that get a higher level of state aid through the foundation budget, that pays for their full-day kindergarten. And some of these communities nearby are in that list. And in fact, even now, given how many kids we have in our kindergarten, we would never get enough money from the state to fully fund it, but we would get certainly a lot more. And of course, every year we look at some of these recommendations that come from MASC and wherever else that the state should fully fund and recognize the recommendations of the commission, the Foundation Study Commission in 2015. I don't know that that has happened yet, but we're in the minority. I mean, our state aid, John, total foundation, 14 per.
Yeah, I don't, I've been here so many years, I don't remember
Yeah,
what this
well,
year's
it's
is.
it's
But-
our per
Right.
pupil is.
Yeah.
And
Our
and
per
s-
pupil's about 12.8.
And so we're getting right now kids that are half-time, getting half-time.
An historical anecdote, when the topic of full-day K finally made its way onto the agenda of the school committee, there was strong support for free all-day K. It did not carry. One of the strongest, if not one of the leaders of the strong proponent for a free full-day K happens to be in the audience tonight, but I will tell you that there was strong support for that meeting for free full-day K. It did not pass because of, I think, because of the cost.
Okay. But we're talking about the percentage
Exactly.
increase for next year.
And I would be in favor of supporting John's
I actually
proposal.
would rather go to 3675, which is a 2.8% increase, because I feel like our costs are more than 2% increased. And even though there was the cost of living in the contract was 2%, that we have steps and lanes and other expenses. So that's where I am on this. So far, I've been counting votes, and people have, are in favor of John's 2.09%, but I would throw that out there that I would prefer to go a little bit higher. And then with seeing this gap, I feel like we should address some of that, of making an adjustment to what some of the assumptions were when it was originally developed, so.
There was also a savings that really is difficult to calculate 2 years out, but when we had the half-day kindergarten, and it wasn't half-day, the part-day kindergarten, we calculate the costs of the midday transportation, the morning students going home and the afternoon students coming, and there was a savings of about $70,000 by not having to provide, except for perhaps one vehicle that could take the handful of children that we have. So that's doesn't show up anywhere, but in the initial year, that showed up as a savings.
Yeah, much better.
So that, the 2.09 was a $17,000.
Right.
Do we have any, is it, what's two, I I know that's a lot of calculations to do on the fly, but
2.8.
how much farther does it get us?
It's not.
I mean, it's not
It's like
gonna
$7,000.
make a big dent, but it's
Yeah.
it's more, so,
I think it's only $7,300. if
It's
everybody was-
$59.50,
Okay,
right?
if-
$59.50
I was doing if everybody paid
of the
full
payer.
freight. It was
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
around there, that's assuming everybody had the full $25, which wouldn't happen. Because that's $25 more, right?
yeah, it's just $25 more is what I was proposing.
I mean,
So-
I'm just curious, has anyone heard of complaints about our tuition rates?
No, that's what Carlos asked last time, and the answer was no. I mean, I've never heard any, personally.
And when you see, even though we have a sliding scale, we have 220 parents paying full.
Right.
So I'm just wondering why we're keeping it as low as we are.
I think we're trying to keep it sort of competitive with
And what is our goal?
private kindergartens.
Okay, I
We
will
won't become
say,
private
when
school.
we did the initial plan, we made a guess that first year we broke even. It was fine. Now we're getting this new statistics. I would say after seeing this year, and my own take is I would like to see the third year, and then could propose an adjustment to, even more, an adjustment to the tuition if necessary, depending on how many children there are that are not paying the full rate. Because that might change again next year and then close the gap. I mean, who knows how many retentions we'll have. I mean, we didn't have, 15 students of the retention, that's a lot.
Yeah, I don't think,
so-
I mean, I think that the percentages, you may go up one year, down another year. So, I mean, at best, it's going to be in that area at all times. I mean, these are just basic bell curves, right? So we know that it's always going to be there, plus or minus some deviation. So, I don't think we can project out, saying, well, maybe we wouldn't have this or we wouldn't have that, and then we'd get up to that level.
Well, and
then,
also-
one thing I should mention, Dot made a good point. We did save about $70,000 worth of transportation, so that's come and gone, and nobody thinks about that anymore. But you would add that, you would take that $70,000 away from the cost of the program if you were doing, a real pure analysis to it. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, if we didn't have full day K, we would still be dealing with $70,000 plus or more in transportation charges for transport of full day K.
Curious to know,
PD.
John, how did you arrive at the 209?
The 209.
The percentage.
Percentage. Yes.
You know what, I said 2%, and then I raised it up to $75, because it came to 71. And I said, let's keep it at 25s, and, and last year we had done 75, so it says, okay, well, let's do another 75, that won't get us too far away from, it'll generate a little bit of revenue, by $17,000 or so, and it still leaves the committee in position to, at some point decide, maybe we should try to make this free.
Liz, I would move that we actually support the increase proposed by John. Perhaps if you want to take a straw vote, just to get an idea. I am reluctant to increase more than that.
Okay, no, go ahead and make your motion.
I make a motion to accept the increase proposed by John for the increase of the full day kindergarten for 2018.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Was it what we?
Carries 5-2.
I was no.
So 5-2.
And is it possible, are we going to be able to, as we move forward through this next, full year, to get some really concrete numbers of exact costs for the kindergarten and exact income brought in? Because at some point, I suppose it's even possible, depending on if there were more students, 30 more students enroll, maybe there's a surplus. Well, that surplus should stay and be saved for future years when there's a negative. That shouldn't go somewhere else. That should stay for kindergarten. So I just want to be sure we're monitoring it in such a way that we know this is what's coming in for kindergarten and this is what's going out for kindergarten.
Right.
That's important to be able to do, I think.
Yeah, one of the ways that what I thought of, Aileen, when I decided, when I took up the management of the account was that, I felt that the people that are going to school this year are paying that tuition. So I don't want to build up a big balance of that. I want to use that and expend it because those people are the, it's 1 year thing for them, right? They're going to pay it.
Right,
So I want to
don't
give them the
disagree,
benefit.
But it should only be used for kindergarten, nothing else, that's all, because
well,
they're
it's-
paying for kindergarten.
Yeah,
So it should
I mean,
only
so
go-
we charge off, the teachers and paras to the, to that full day K account. And we use up, like I said, the majority of those funds, so we're not building any big balance in that. And, I'll give you the balances. So, we generated 18, this year's budget says 800,000, right? Will there be 18,000 left over? We could apply that 18,000 in this year's budget, okay? Because we don't want to be carrying big balances. I don't think we want to be carrying balances in this account. I think it is for the purpose that's intended to. And as we see, the costs of full-day K do actually exceed the revenues that are collected. So, it is being applied to full-day K.
So let's, just so we can close this topic, if we wanted to discuss this further in terms of going from, a fee paying to a free full-day kindergarten, when is the appropriate time to start discussing that? Do you want to start thinking about a warrant article in the future?
That's in our 5-year financial vision plan. And so I think we keep moving with that, and once we start socializing that more with the community, we point that out, that we need feedback from the community on how people feel about this. But that's one of the elements that's in that grid.
One of the
Well, and
budget planning
to be
meetings
careful
should
that
be.
when we say that's one of the elements, in my mind,
That's
it's one of the
long-term.
elements to be discussed. It's not
Yes.
like we're
Yes,
saying, I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
yeah,
people
yeah,
watching
yeah.
on TV to say, we're saying in our 5-year
Yeah.
plan is that it will be
Right.
paid. It's something that we, in
It's
our
an
5-year
issue
plan,
out there that we
for the
want to
community
have.
addressed.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that clarification. Okay. So 6.2, to hear a proposal for athletics fees for fiscal year 19 and beyond and act appropriate, as appropriate. We first raised this at our last meeting when we were talking about the other fees and tuitions. And we raised it at the last meeting because athletic fees have not gone up since the last time we voted an increase was fall of 2013. And since that time, we made some equity adjustments in the contract of 2014 to 2017, and then there were cost of living increases in this past contract. So John has made a proposal, and we'll listen to that proposal, and then we'll have some discussion, because we've heard some feedback from the community on this as well, so.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
it's just a proposal at this point.
Right, that's the last committee, at the last committee meeting in the 20th, the committee asked me to make a proposal to increase the fees for athletics. So, what I did basically was, I took a look at, I asked to look at all of our youth sports fees and, what they actually charge. Because, when you get into the high school sports, a student, currently our fee structure is for $325, you get to play 3 sports a year, okay? And those sports, they're really, they're high-level sports, they're engaged sports, they're professional coaching in the sports, paid coaching, there's transportation, there's travel, so it's really, in my view, you could look at it as, it's a high level of sport activity for a student to have. So, if you compare that to some of the youth sport activities, like a youth football or a travel basketball or a travel soccer, I thought, what do those programs go for? Because I want to make sure that I don't want to price it too high. if I had my druthers, I'd say, let's not increase it at all, okay? But, you know, and so I looked, and some of them, you know, for travel gals basketball, $350, and, you know, youth soccer at $230, you know, travel baseball for $250. Then, you know, you have travel basketball at $250, and you got Hingham Babe Ruth baseball, a travel level at $400, okay? So, you know, with that, I said, we're at $325. My view was, if we, you know, $25 on $325 is 7%. Okay, you know, if you look at it percent-wise, it's only $25, but it's 7%. But I didn't think that 400 was an insurmountable figure. And, you know, based on that, if a student plays and they can play up to 3 sports, $400 to play 3 sports a year, that's not a bad fee relative to the alternative of doing youth sports, okay? So that's how I came to the idea that $400 is about the level that I'd want to get at if I had to go up. And with that, I thought I made the proposal that we would do that over a 3-year period. We'd go from $325 to $350, $375 to $400. Currently, hockey does pay an extra $100. I would maintain that level at the $100, and then the family cap is really set at 2 times. So if you have more than 2 students in there, you'd only pay for 2 students. You wouldn't pay for a 3rd student. So that's how I got to the proposal. And so the recommendation that I made was $25 a year over the next 3 years, and it's making the family cap twice the amount and leaving the incremental extra of $100 the same.
Okay. Any thoughts, comments?
I guess just for clarification, the athletic fees exist just like the kindergarten to help fund the program, because otherwise it wouldn't be offered, correct? Is that why athletic, when I went to high school, I don't remember paying athletic fees, but maybe now costs have gotten so ridiculously high that that's one way to offer these programs is due to these athletic fees. Is that the reason why they're being charged? I'm just curious what the history is of the athletic fees.
Well, we do, it provides an offset each year to the school budget. And most communities, sadly, have had to go to some sort of fee. They're not all structured the same way, and, you know, you can have discussions about whether it should be per sport or multiple sports for one fee, which is what we have now, and something I personally like, but people could have different views on that. But the intent here, I certainly don't believe was ever that the program would be fully supported by student fees. And, you know, certainly some people could believe and did believe that the kindergarten fee was different from that. It was this, but fees here were to enable us to continue to be able to offer the breadth of the sports program that we have and encourage kids to participate. And we see it a little bit differently than you might think. You might see a youth sport in that we see in a high school that sports is really part of the learning program. So trying to fund it so you can keep it at the kind of level that we have has always been something that was intended.
I would agree with that. I think sports is part of the curriculum, just like music, drama, or any other extracurricular activity. My next question would be, why are we going to raise it, though, every single year over 3 years? What's the thinking behind that?
Well,
is it because we're trying
mostly
to get
the
to this
idea of a
target number,
3-year
or-
plan
Well,
rather
he
than
said
a
he wants
1-year
to get
plan
400.
is not to have to go through this each year. This kind of thing that we need to then kind of rush into because it's budget time and we need to have these discussions. So the idea of the 3 years was simply could have been different rates, could have been different amounts in the 3 years, but We wanted to have something that, not unlike salaries, you don't want to have to negotiate salaries every single year.
But I think, John, you did specifically say your goal was to get to 400. So that was,
Well, I
Well, that
mean,
was your-
it
John's
was,
goal,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I thought 400, not that I want to get to 400.
No, I
right,
understand.
But is it, 400 is where I'd like to stop if we had, if we had to, but, but I don't want to do it for $25 every year. It just doesn't amount to that much money when it comes down to it from a budgetary standpoint. I mean, I'm looking at a $52 million budget, when we're doing $4,000 or $5,000 here or there. It takes a lot of time to address these issues, and we got other big, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million issues that are out there that you need to contend with. So I wanted to sort of, in one sense, say, I think 400 is palatable. I want to put this behind me for the next 3 years, and let's go on. I'm sorry, it is a little bit expedient, but I mean, that is part of, what drove me to say, let's just do this 3 years and let's get to the end of it.
Sorry, go ahead, Cynthia.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, there is a time value to money, right? So, to your point about spending a lot of time on it, but just quickly, do you know how many student athletes we have right now, just roughly? I'm just trying to figure out the math. How much is this income, is this generating to offset the expenses?
I mean,
If you don't, I
I don't know
can
the
get it.
exact
Okay.
count. 700, it's in the 700s, I
Okay.
think.
All right.
But
There.
the revenue that we collected was about, does somebody know?
I mean, it's certainly over half of, I know that over half of the students
That's what I thought. Okay.
participate
So
in
about 75%.
sports, though.
Percent, not, yeah, of the high school.
So,
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah.
I do remember that being accurate.
Okay.
If we generated 276 in fees, right, about 25, 30,000 is gate receipts and extra fees that we get from, because we have to pick up Pilgrim now, but we collect those receipts. So, yeah, if you look at that and you're saying, 30,000, you're at a base of 246, times .07, that's $17,000. Okay, but the thing about this, by increasing the athletic fee, it won't affect the offset this year because already I'm expending more than what we collect because there's a corpus there we're using up. I'm expending $323 because, we had monies reserved for letters of credit that we had to keep in balance when we were doing the Fields project. So the offset that we have in the budget is already greater than the fees that we will collect, and even the fees we will collect even if we go through this 3-year program. What it will do is it will help us extend that period of time where we can offset greater than what we collect. But it won't impact FY19.
John, thank you for doing the research, because I've often thought that, it's a little unfair to pay $325 for 3 sports or 1, so you could argue that you should pay a percentage of that, a third of that, if you're only paying 1 sport, but, anyone that's ever paid for a travel in-town sport knows, and you've just explained how much money that is, so in fact, it's actually a bargain to do 3 sports.
yeah.
And that's really the
Paying for
thinking.
1.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really the thinking of why we went with that model.
Yeah.
Because years ago, when we first had athletic fees, we had a gigantic committee made up of parents and coaches and all kinds of people looking at what should the model be, what should the cost be, and so on. And the belief of the committee at that time was, if we have one fee that encourages kids to play 3 sports, the goal is for kids to be able to participate, and we believe they're more likely to participate in that 3rd sport if they don't have to pay for it. And having more participants rather than fewer was in itself a want.
And I think it innately also maybe encourages kids to try sports they would not. Because I know one of my own daughters tried a sport she never would have tried, but she didn't have a sport one season, and, she did 2 other ones, but it's like, well, you already paid. She's like, I think I want to try this. I'm like, go ahead. So it does, I think, foster that concept, too, of maybe trying something you wouldn't have because you're not paying extra to do it.
I was approached by a parent who I think I came to the conclusion is representative of a number of parents who have kids in the athletic program. Obviously, I don't anymore. And the sense I got was that there's some hesitation, not about the fee per se, but rather the way it's set up or the way it needs to be evaluated. And I thought about it because this conversation was at least twice and maybe 3 times. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm going to just float the suggestion that, as John points out, we don't really need it for the offset this year. In point of fact, the offset is already there at 323. I'm going to float the suggestion that we not vote for an increase this time, but rather let's look at this going forward, whether we put together a subcommittee or a study group or ad hoc or whatever you want to do. And I'd be willing to help with that.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
I welcome that suggestion, and I think based on the questions tonight about this and further data that would be useful for socializing, that any increase we would vote to be able to explain it to parents and families, and in light of the data we got on the full-day kindergarten too, if we can have some more data together on this and hold this to the spring so that we can, if we decide to increase the fee, it still implements in the fall, but we can spend some more time on it because I'm also watching the clock because we have a lot left to do tonight. So if everyone is...
Just in light of that, just wanted to say that I
Yeah.
also got a call from a concerned parent, and that's exactly what they asked, and that, that he's not really against the increase, but he just think that we should be discussing this a little further.
Yep.
So I'd make a motion that we table 6.2, 6.2?
Yep.
Until a future discussion.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Does anyone from the audience have anything else to add? Okay. Okay, 6.3, to act on proposed revisions to section 6.2 of age requirements of the School Committee Policy Handbook as recommended by the Policy Subcommittee.
So y'all should have a paper copy of the most recent, it was at your place, the most recent revision, because we met literally just before this committee, this meeting.
Take it away.
Yeah, exactly. Based on the feedback that we got from last meeting, we made 2 very small changes. It's in the last sentence. Parents with questions, we changed concerns to questions about their child's readiness should contact the principal, and it used to say should get in touch with the principal. So those are the 2 changes that we made since last meeting, and not a whole lot of changes right there. And again, it's our hope that adding this paragraph into this policy will help to clarify the expectations of the Hingham Public Schools in regard to the age at which parents enroll their children in kindergarten, and encourage conversation with educators so that good decisions can be made by all parties.
Okay. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve the changes outlined in policy 6.2, age requirements.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Anybody have questions? Comments? Okay, I think this does clarify better in my opinion, so. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And then Dot is going to use this in the meeting tomorrow night.
Yes,
With
we
the-
would like to put this on the website.
Right.
And also make it available to folks tomorrow night. And my plan would be to take the procedures of the new protocols that we talked about at 2 prior meetings and have this be the header of that document. So here would be the policy, and you've all seen the protocols, and they would follow.
6.4, to act on proposed revisions to Section 4 Fiscal Management of the School Committee Policy Handbook as recommended by the Policy Subcommittee.
No changes heard since last meeting, so we're just leaving it as is, and I would make a motion that we accept the changes to the entirety of Section 4 in Fiscal Management in the Policy.
Second that?
Committee Policy.
Okay, discussion. I had raised the question of of retaining quarterly reports
Oh.
and not doing them periodically. So I didn't know if you guys talked about that.
We did, I apologize.
Oh, I see, I thought that we just sort of agreed that we were going to change it. So I don't know. After that discussion we had at the full school
Which
committee.
section is that?
I thought that was sort of
That was just
a
what we were gonna
consensus
do.
that we were going to do that, so.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Liza,
what section?
That, what, good question. Sorry. 4.3,
Thank you.
and there was an, shoot.
Yeah, 4.3.
Yeah, it was 4.3 and then, and 4.3.2.
So you wanted to leave quarterly, and I think we did agree that there was nothing.
Leaving it the way
It was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
It doesn't, and we can decide.
Right,
We
because
won't
the
hear the
conversation
report.
specifically last time was, as I recall, that we were saying we wanted it to be left quarterly so it's a requirement, but then we could always discuss that if there was no reason to do it, then we wouldn't do
We
it.
just waive it.
Right. I thought that we sort of, I remember the conversation and thought we sort of had all agreed that that probably was a good idea, so.
Okay, so my apologies for not changing that in the thing, but we can vote on that. So we're taking quarterly out of both of those and rewording it so that periodic, or leaving quarterly into both of those and rewording it so periodically it's taken out.
Right.
So it would say a quarterly, 4.3.2 would say a quarterly summary financial statement will be provided to the school committee. And 4.3 would say, the superintendent shall prescribe procedures for handling funds and shall provide the school committee and other town agencies with quarterly and, when required, special reports in sufficient detail to keep the school committee informed, Okay.
So,
So I'll make a motion.
amend
I'll
motion,
amend
yeah.
my motion to include all that I just said.
and I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 6.5, to act on proposed revisions to Section 1.7, acceptance of gifts and major fundraising of the School Committee Policy Handbook, as recommended by the Policy Subcommittee.
Okay, so this one, the procedures are, you have the hard copy of the procedures. All this also is, Kate kindly put it in the folder, so you will have it in perpetuity. But the procedures are here, no changes were made with those. What we're suggesting to 1.7, because of concerns brought up by Michelle and a couple other people about essentially making it about the signage, the permanent signage, and not affecting other gifts, making too much work, essentially. So we changed our recommendation to say, any gift of permanent signage promoting private or commercial sponsorship shall conform to applicable town bylaws and be approved by the school committee. All other gifts shall conform to applicable town bylaws and follow the guidelines specified in procedures 1.7 A, B, and C. So we're really taking out the third paragraph of that policy and replacing it with this to clarify the permanent signage of any ilk has to go through the committee, but otherwise the procedures.
And effectively, we're not changing anything at all, except for if there's permanent signage. End story. Which is what we really started out to do, and then we got a little carried away, had to rein ourselves back
But we're
in.
making it
more clear.
It was a little muddy. Yeah.
So sorry, just, so gifts of permanent signage that promote a private.
Yes.
So like a class gift.
Right.
It doesn't have to come
Right.
to the school committee to go
Anything
to the
promoting-
principal or something. Okay,
Sponsorship of any kind.
got it, okay. Just want to clarify. Okay.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we accept the updated revisions to policy 1.7.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Now, new business. To discuss a possible warrant article for replacing the glass block windows on the high school gymnasium roof structure and act as appropriate. Ed and John, do you want to give us a quick summary of a new issue that we all recently learned about at the high school?
Right.
Now, let me set the table, and John and I will go back and forth on this. When Katie and Doug finished their facilities report on the various school buildings as well as other town buildings, which we have a copy of in the facilities report of December 2016, they then took it upon themselves to contact the various principals of various schools as to some of the issues that the in-house people had. And at the high school in particular, the phys ed health teacher raised the issue with Katie that one of her rooms, and I don't know if it was the girls' locker room or her private office, it's really not important, the heat was stifling. So in fact, Katie moseyed over, and in point of fact, it was stifling. So they got up on the roof to see where the air handler was, and in point of fact, the filters the filters were clogged and had to be changed, and that was a slam dunk. But as somebody turned around and looked, they realized, and you all have pictures of it, that the four sides of the celestial windows, they're called, around the high school gym are deteriorating. And Katie brought that to John's attention, and John touched bases with me. I, in fact, was up on the roof with Katie and took these pictures, and there are several more, and they're dramatic. John sent out a help to an engineering firm, which we have a report on, and I'll let John pick it up from there, and I'll jump back in.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Yeah, so by looking at the pictures, you see that, with the windows falling out, and then when you look in the inside of the gym, I mean, these windows are also visible from the inside of the gym, so you saw that there's a piece that was on the air handler, those are the same windows, okay, and they're built sort of in layers and stuff, so, and this, immediate concern is like, is this a safety issue? Could these windows possibly fall in as opposed to fall out? So, with that, we've had structural engineers go there and take a look, and, there is a safety concern there, especially with the higher winds that we've been experiencing lately. And, the sills are actually taking on water. Katie got this one engineer, it's got like an 80-page report with pictures and, details and stuff. So there isn't, we've consulted a couple of structural engineers, and both engineers, one is Habib and Associates, the other is Westland Architects. They are, and actually we had engineering, what was it, Rivermore Engineering in Situate. So three, the first one went out and said, this isn't really my specialty, but
That's
I'd be
right.
concerned with,
Forgot about that.
the possibility of something falling in. And he recommended Westling, and then I had always dealt with Habib. So we had asked Habib, about it, and then we wanted to get some type of structural, but not spend a whole lot of money yet to determine if there was a safety issue, so we can find out, how we should go forward. What we were really looking at is, knowing this is a very big item, right? This is a very big, costly item. When we had the glass block windows, when we asked Habib, they had done one of those for another school during the course of, last year or so, and she sent along some pictures. And it's nice when they're all fixed up. And she said it was $83 a square foot. So we went out and measured the square feet, and it's like there's 3,700 square feet. So that's, needless to say, it's a very expensive project. So we have, both engineers have said that it's possible that we can put some netting on the inside of these windows. Okay, so I think that, we need to take this in a couple of steps. One is, I think we need to get some netting up there. So we'll have to have an engineer design some netting. So we put some netting on the inside. So if there should be some wind, and something blows in, it's never going to hit a person, okay? So, I think that's a prudent and important thing that we need to do, and we've got both of those engineers sort of on call, sending them blueprints so we can kind of get an idea how much to tack up this netting you were talking about, okay? Because I think we need to do that this year. However, the larger problem here is if something blows in, now you have a hole in your building. So it's something that we sort of need to address, and I don't think we have a lot of time to address it. So, Ed and I talked, we were looking at capital, Cynthia and Carlos and Ed, we talked, what should we do? Should we put this on capital? Because it's about probably, I would say bottom end, I don't know the figure yet, but if you do the math out for 3,700 feet at $83, and if you add 40,000 for design, and if you put 20% in for contingency, you're upwards of $400,000. So we knew that this was, this is a budget buster. So initially we had talked about, making an article out of it and bringing it to the committee. Because what we'd have to do, even though I don't know the exact figure, we're going to try to get a better figure, we have to place an article placeholder by January 19th, I think. Is it 19th this year, or was it last year?
It's doing the
Well,
20th,
the
which is a
20th.
Saturday.
So
so
January
19th is our
19th.
deadline.
So at least a placeholder saying we'd be looking for money for doing a repair of this window. There's a couple of alternatives with these window systems. One is that, sort of replace the block with a code compliant block. And the other is this stuff called CalWall, which actually looks pretty good. That's a nice picture. Katie, has a bunch of pictures. There's some information on CalWall. So we're going to try to get pricing, for both of these. In one sense, you look at it, it's like, oh, maybe that's not $400,000, but I don't know what the number is really going to be. But I think that we have to go to capital. We have to go to capital on next Wednesday, the 17th. Okay? And the warrant article has to be in by the 19th or so. We're trying to get some types of estimates. I don't know that I'll have a number for the 17th or for the 19th, but we can always put a placeholder in without a number. So, that's it. So I wanted to, we need to, it definitely has to get done, because if the wind blows something in, nobody's going to get hurt, because we're going to take care of the safety issue of it. But we're going to have to repair this.
Okay.
Dr. Geller, will you just advance to the next slide? You had it up a minute ago. That gives you a good example. If you look to the far left corner, you can see a piece of the block is blown out. The second one at the bottom from the left, you can see some cracks, and then you go to just to the right of the transition, and you'll see water in the blocks. And if you look real closely, I don't know if that metal is framing or is that structural, and does it need a new sill? We just plain flat don't know.
Okay. So I have shared this information with Mary Power and with Dan Coughlin, who's our rep from advisory. And when I talked with Mary Power, her personal view on this, and is that we should consider, well, I think we need to work with everyone, the selectmen, the advisory committee, make as many people aware of this as quickly as possible so that we can get their cooperation, and how do we address the finances, whether it's a warrant article or talking with capital outlay. Mary was, and her communication to me was, this is comparable to the library roof, and the library roof was put into the capital budget last year, and the capital budget was adjusted accordingly for the library roof. Also, I did remind her that the gym is a community space where town meeting is held, town elections are held, so that this is not just a school issue, not just a phys ed, not just a basketball team issue. I think that should help
Right.
us with making this all work for the community. So she also, and then I did express our concern with capital that we don't want this to be absorbed into the school's general capital allocation. And she understood that. She's like, no, you still need your computers and your carpets and that type of thing. So she also would like to see this be consistent the way we treat these large, necessary projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I suggest is, if you can follow up with Tom Mayo and Betty Foley, make sure they have the information. Advisory has a meeting tomorrow night, so Dan can communicate to advisory, and then somebody should also give the heads up to the capital outlay committee that this is there, this is something that's an emergency. How can we all address this together? And so that I would like to then, we can talk about this on Thursday.
Right.
Again, we have our 2 work sessions, we can
Yep.
act if we need to at either of those meetings.
Well, on Thursday, you have to vote vote us to bring capital to the capital outlay anyways.
Okay.
Right.
So,
But we have to put that
So-
on the agenda Thursday.
yeah.
It's on the agenda. I
Okay.
think it is on the
Okay.
agenda.
So, so that would be my suggestion, is that let's get these other people involved and help us solve this
Sure.
issue. Because, it is something we just learned about, and it's a challenge, but I don't have the answer, but,
But you can see it's real.
yeah,
This
yeah.
is-
The
this is-
pictures are
this-
very helpful
this is
to
real.
be able to explain it to people.
We have many more, thanks to Dr.
Yeah. So that would be my suggestion, is we not act on this tonight, and that.
The other
we-
possibility now, just throwing this out, right, okay,
Yeah.
because, so this is windows, right? We also have, the high school is getting to be 20 years old. We also have like air handlers, heating air handlers that need to be replaced there, okay? And the roof is also getting old. So when you take windows, boilers, and roofs, that sort of falls under a MSBA accelerated repair. So that's just another thought that's out there.
But how would that fly with the Foster thing? Can we have
Well,
both
you
going
can
at
put an
once?
accelerated repair in, that's the core program, we'd still do that too, I'm not sure, there's nothing that says they can't pick more than one project for
Well,
any one of these.
Then, John, I would look at the solution to this, if it's more efficient and effective to read, you're talking about the roof of the gym?
Yeah, well,
So could we put the parts together then, and,
the report
try
would
for the
indicate that,
accelerated
they don't know how there's water getting in here, they don't know exactly what the roof deck looks like, or, what the terms
Roof
are.
on top and the
And,
roof that's
you
below
saw
the
the
roof.
thing sitting on the air handler when Doug and Katie were going up there to do the maintenance. We, in the budget for capital, there is an air handler too,
okay.
to be replaced at that school, but, it needs to be a replacement plan for all of the handlers there, and I think there's 10 of them.
The only thing we have to keep in mind there is there's a similar kind of deadline
Right.
because the SOI for
Right.
the accelerated repair is due in February.
Right, much earlier.
Yeah, so put the deadlines together and
Well,
see what we can
I'm
come
just
up
trying
with.
I don't know if there's interest, or we
Yeah.
should just focus on the windows, get the windows fixed, and, and leave it be, and
We're
and
doing
wait
it all
for
at
the
the
other
same
stuff
time,
for
might
the
as well
wellness
get the
center.
information and figure it out.
Do those two committees talk to each other? I just wouldn't want this to
Impact Foster.
impact our chances of getting Foster.
Which to,
The
the
two
accelerated.
MSBA
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I know, yeah, I
That's-
hear what you're saying, Cynthia.
we'll give you that one.
It may not
Save
be
us some
worth
money.
it, but I just wanted to,
Yeah.
throw it out, because you look at it, what is it? It's roofs, windows, and
And the other thing too, you want to
boilers.
have, your consideration that the safety, I mean, it's
Absolutely. Carlos is absolutely right.
Yeah.
That has to be, we have to get the professional opinion on how to do it.
Yes.
And regardless of how the,
That we have to do
how we do
this
the big
year out of the
project, I'm gonna leave that
operating
up
budget
to
or other,
y'all,
revolving
but
fund that
we
we
need-
might
we have to
I
get
don't
that
know-
safety
Don't know
up.
how much it will be.
Yeah.
How much of an issue is it if the project was done, like with Plymouth River, that you have to, when you start on a project, you have to bring things to code? Is that something that we need to keep in mind?
Not.
only from the point of view that you can't use those blocks anymore. If you had a ready supply because you stored 10,000 of them in someplace, and for replacing, you can't use them, they're out of code. But there are products that John showed that are similar, one product that's similar, and there's another product that's different, higher R value, and obviously much safer.
Yeah, and I have
These
to
are the
mention.
only natural light sources for
Yeah,
the
we
gym.
We gotta get some light in there.
I threw out a figure, right, but this could be considerably higher than that figure too, because, there may be hazmat stuff now in that concrete that has to be, removed when they do this. I mean, in that sense, any code, things like that, it's not gonna hit a level where you have to do so many more repairs. But clearly, we'd have to bring it, if there's hazmat stuff, it'd have to be remediated, corrected, at the same time, so, and
Okay.
that'll be unknown.
So let's talk again on Thursday.
Yep.
John, do we have any insurance things this year?
Insurance for, like, settlements, or?
Well,
For town
any
meeting.
kind of other item we need for a warrant?
Oh,
As
no,
we
they
did
raised that level. Last year, they raised that, the new law that went into effect made that level $150,000 as opposed to $20,000. So anything under $150 now just goes into the regular insurance account, and it's now an insurance proceeds in excess of $150,000, where you have to go to the town and ask them to transfer the money back.
Okay.
And we don't have any claims, fortunately, that large. We did get a big claim itself over the holiday weekend, over the holiday, December 28th at South School, maybe 40, 50, 60,000, not sure of the total there yet.
So then that's 7.2, to discuss any additional town meeting warrant articles. We don't anticipate any at this time.
Not that I can break over.
Okay. All right. Oh, 7.2 again. Next, to hear an overview of the fiscal 19 operating budget. Finally, we're there. Everybody.
All right, so I'm going to
Stretch
talk
and
fast,
Wide awake.
Do you not have your?
partly because my voice is going, and partly because we have a lot to get through. So I'm proposing that we do the following.
Thank you.
I know you like to hand these out.
It's a different color than last year.
John is passing out.
We're using up
You
the
may need it for
inventory, so
reference.
No, it's fine.
Okay, that's the same thing.
What's that?
Just, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Just add a few percent on top.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Their names.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, for those of you at home, we were supposed to do this discussion on Thursday night last week, but town hall was closed due to the snowstorm, and so we are having it tonight to try and stay on schedule. So this is the first presentation from the administration of their proposal for the budget for fiscal year 19.
Doesn't matter. Why don't we turn the lights out? My suggestion is that there really are two parts to what we have to accomplish tonight. One is the overview, and members of the school committee all received over a week ago the actual budget letter, the budget message. And the PowerPoint that I'm going to do tonight is really a visual of the budget message. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint fairly quickly, if you can hold any questions until the end on the PowerPoint. It really is information that came from this budget message and nothing more than that. Then we have to go through the first several sections. So you actually have the agenda from last Thursday of the budget sections we're going to go through. There are 12 of them, and I can go through those fairly quickly, but that's where the detail is, all right? So the budget message is here. Those of you getting a handout tonight are getting it. It will go on the website, as of course will all of the budget information that we go through. So if I can now get out of this. This. Okay, so this is the overview. Just quickly, this is the process. You'll note there are 2 green sections there, and the process starts with the school committee. We have a planning meeting and then developing guiding principles and the budget calendar, and the process ends with the school committee. Look down at the bottom. There will be a vote ultimately, where this document will go from being a preliminary budget proposal that the administration is making to the school committee, but will end with the school committee adopting its own budget. And of course, there will be a vote as well by the selectmen, and most importantly, a vote by the advisory committee. And that vote will be the recommendation on the school committee floor. And the rest of it is internal, how we come up with the process of soliciting input from our, particularly our department leaders and our principals, and then our meeting with them and interacting over what they're proposing and why, and then our meeting among the 4 of us at central office in terms of what we will put in this proposed budget. Every year there are different challenges and concerns that may come up, things that may impact what our decision-making is in terms of the specific proposal, and here are some for this year. The special education budget is up some. Net tuitions are down, and that's partly because of circuit breaker reimbursement. And the teacher account is up because there are 3 additional teachers requested in this budget and some additional para hours as well. Just today, I got a lobbying request, and I'll discuss this in more detail on Wednesday night with the CPAC. But there is a local superintendent who's done a terrific amount of research, because in fact, this year, for the offset for the coming year, we were funded, and every other community funded at 65%, above 3 times the foundation budget figure. And we're supposed to, by the law, circuit breaker law, be funded at 75%. Well, in the early years of the circuit breaker law, they never funded it very much at all. And there were many years we didn't get that. In the current, and then things got better. In the last several years, they have been funding it at 75%, in one year 72%. But this year, they funded it, they being the legislature who has to appropriate dollars approved by the budget for this account to be funded at the full amount. They funded at 65%. 65% and 75%, 10% doesn't seem like a very big number. But if you're math people like Dave and I are, 10% of a very big number is a very big number. So in fact, for us, the loss is the potential of $198,000 that we could have used for an offset that we're not getting. So there's quite a lobbying thing going on, and we've been asked by this superintendent, who reflects a lot of us, and also by the Mass, that we do some lobbying. What we found out is the reason the governor did not approve this aspect of the budget, full funding of circuit breaker, really has to do with his concerns and others, that he listened to concerns about what funding is going to come from Washington in the near future. And so uneasy about having funds available to replace possibly other losses that will come at the federal level. So we'll talk more about that, but, you know, it's not just a little bit short of full funding. It's $198,000 of full funding. So that's reflected in the second concern overall about state aid and where it's going in federal aid. And in fact, we have lost several of the smaller grants that we've received from on the federal level. And so a lot of uncertainty about where that will be. We have fewer retirements. Really only 2 people that we know are going to be retiring, and that therefore requested the stipend that they would get for giving us a year's notice. And then there are 3 other possible retirements. We don't know about any of those. And retirements and full year leaves of absence are the one way that we are able to reduce cost for the possibility of getting more of the things that we really need that aren't yet in the budget. And so that's looks like kind of a small pool of hope this year. And of course, the leaves we don't know until the 1st. But typically the rule of thumb is if people come back from a leave, we likely have replaced them for a year with a less costly salary. And so if they come back, it's going to cost us more money. On the other hand, if they don't come back, we probably would continue with the sub we've had, and that would be another year of savings. Overall staffing, with the overall staffing, we're looking particularly at other kinds of needs than enrollment needs. I think everyone understands when you have more kids, then you need more teachers. But when we have more children with different needs, we need more staffing. It's of a different nature. And that's where we look at things like the counselors and the adjustment counselors and the special ed teachers, all of which are in this budget. So we have defined level services to be a fairly broad definition. The kinds of services that we provide, many of them mandated, not necessarily more children. So we'll talk about, as we go through the detail of the budget, we'll talk about the different categories in which these positions fall. Collective bargaining, we're fully settled with 5 of our 6 units. We haven't started with the 6th unit, and every year we have some individual salaries that need to be negotiated. And so money for that remaining collective bargaining unit and the individual salaries remains in the allowance. So there is still an allowance here in the budget, special function. It's not as large as it was a year ago, because a year ago we didn't have any of our collective bargaining units settled. So there's good news there. Overall enrollment, the numbers are anticipated to be fairly level for the coming school year. Middle school and elementary each down, and the middle to elementary to middle school, the numbers are getting smaller at the elementary. So 5th into 6th is, as compared with 5th grade moving out, still larger than kindergarten moving in, because the elementary is down, and middle school to high school now is bigger transfer of students than elementary to middle school. But we talked a bit, not so much at this table, but we've talked about our efforts to try to reduce and change the culture of children who are entering kindergarten at age 6 rather than age 5. And we've had 2 parent forums where we attempted to get that information. The feelings of parents about our numbers, which would seem to be larger than other communities that we compare ourselves with or that are nearby. So if in fact we're successful in changing that thinking of parents, and if in fact more children come at an age appropriate 5-year age, then we could have more children, at least in the first year of this, more children in our kindergarten. And so we do have a kindergarten teacher in the budget for that eventuality. We can't quantify it other than to say we know likely there will be some kids that will need to come at age 6. That is the right age for them, and they may be special ed students is one category. And so let's assume that there were 20 or so of those youngsters, and that's why we've put in the, it truly is an unknown in terms of number, but that's why we put in an extra section in teacher. We might not need that, as it turns out. A lot of it depends upon where the children actually are. And then other things that are mandates and cost growth, and one of those is in professional development. We didn't increase that by a large amount, but as we look forward, we need professional development for new adoptions and new programs that the state has in its view, such as civics as part of the curriculum, planning and professional development money there, and also the computer science and enhancing that whole program. And that, in fact, may become one of the course areas for the state curriculum. So if not this year, then as we look to the future in terms of planning, we're going to need some more dollars there. Enrollment, here's the kindergarten enrollment going back to 06, 07, and it's kind of interesting when you look at it because there's not a lot of difference between 06, 07 and our current year, 17, 18, 286 and 289, and that enrollment has been all over the place. 15, 16 is the one in red, and that's was 303. So really, we don't have a clear pattern of what's happening here. I had hoped that when we instituted full-day kindergarten, it would be a way of us having a more stable kindergarten, because that's crucial to how we plan for all of the other grades. Overall enrollment, you can see, is down slightly. We had a peak in 4257 in the 15-16 year. That was the year kindergarten actually started, and then we've gone down slightly in the 2 years since then. And because we don't have a real clear view of what's going to happen at kindergarten, it's hard to know what that graph is going to look like as we move forward. We had increased K-12 by more than 600 students at 17.5% through 15, 16. So that's a really big increase. And this is the grades 1 through 5 enrollments, and that's truly a function of kindergarten, how big kindergarten is. But again, it's kind of an interesting graph because in 08, 09, and that was a tough time financially. Remember, that's when we were talking about e-school, and our elementary schools were overcrowded, and we had 724 kids at Plymouth River, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're in 17, 18, so, you know, over that period of time, we started at 1606, and this is 1 through 5, remember, not kindergarten, and we ended up at 1610. One of the, so it'll be interesting as we go forward this year with the enrollment study, a formal study, the data that we're going to be giving these people in terms of our past history is, I'm not sure if you were projecting just on the basis of these numbers, you might be a little stymied if we think we would come out. But they take other factors into consideration, like construction and growth and birth rates and all those other things as well. And the middle and the high school have shown a steady growth. The high school is growing again this year, and we expect will grow slightly next year. And the middle school has started to level off. And even though all 3 grades there are over 300 students, 2 of the biggest grades in the last several years are moving to the high school. So again, not clear what's going to happen there over time. And this graph may become irrelevant. So this is a graph of grade 1. And the reason we have a graph of just grade 1 is that we experienced a time not too many years ago when we had a big bump up in children who entered in grade 1 not having attended our kindergarten. So each one of these bars represents a grade 1 enrollment. The big blue part of it is how many children there were in the prior year's kindergarten, and the red is how many children entered our kindergarten. And you can see the kind of the peak at 14, 15, we had more than 60 students who weren't with us in kindergarten and came in grade 1. And a lot of that was we didn't have a full-day kindergarten at that point, and many of those children were in a full-day daycare situation. Or they were in a private kindergarten, and we have several private kindergartens right in our town. So the question here is, so what's going to happen in 18-19? We still continue to have a little bump up, and I think we always will. There'll always be parents who want a kindergarten that may be at Derby or maybe at St. Paul's, or who have moved into town and know we have a full day now, or maybe there will be more people moving in. So I don't think that bump up thing will ever go away, but it seems to have been mitigated at least a bit by the fact of the full day, which we anticipated. We do our monthly enrollments, and the points we always look at are what's happening as 5th grade moves into 6th grade. So here we're going to have 323 kids if we use our December enrollment, and that's what we do. 323 5th graders that will move into the 6th grade, but only 289, or if you adjust this for 20 more possible kindergartners, 310. But in any event, that is the major reason for any sort of net loss. I would point out that when we do the projecting from year to year, we make the assumption that once the kids get into the queue, if you will, we don't lose kids on a net basis from year to year. They continue to grow. Where we lose the youngsters is at grade 7, where some kids go off to private schools. Mostly the parochial schools have that model now, where their program is a 6-year one and starts in grade 7. And then again from 9 to 10. But it's not an overall increase in numbers going to private school. It's just that instead of saying 35 or 40 at the high school level, it's some go at grade 7 and some go at grade 9. So that's the simple projection method, that we guesstimate what will happen at grade 1. We know what's going to happen from there on. We know that as we get into grade 7, some children are going to go off to private school, and the same thing at grade 9, but we move kids along, and so we think that this number that we give to the principals and directors every year at the beginning of the process for them to plan around is a very simple projection, and it does not include any net in or out. And if it did, it would be a net in. So we see this as a modest or minimum projection, but it's something to go with in terms of the following year. So we had in our, with a little more detail than this, which we'll come to, but we had in our budget message categorized the kinds of requests that we made. They're categorized according to the budget function they fall in, and a lot of them fall in what we're going to talk about tonight. And we categorize them in terms of whether they're included in the budget because they're just things that the costs have gone up on, or whether they're in the budget because we define them to be level service increase needs, or whether they're things that we really do recommend but that we couldn't fit them into either of those categories, so they're not in the budget, or there are a handful of requests because our folks worked hard at being reasonable at their requests and at the same time trying to meet their needs. There are a few there that could be justified but that we could not recommend at this time given the other priorities that we felt were higher. So this is a hard graph, but I think you have this anyway in the handout that the audience gained. So these are all of the requests that were made. And we're going to, tonight and the next 2 nights, go through all of these sections of the budget. And you can see that the ones that are in the blue, which are largely in the 2300 account, the ones that are in the blue are in the budget, either because we felt they were costs that we just had to meet and that we had no control over, or they're things that we have justified on the basis of being level service items. So we'll go through those as we go through the detail of the budget. So there's the big picture of all of them. We also have put in 2 slides that have them enlarged, but just to see the scope of everything, you want to look at this one, and so if you have a budget book, you have both sets, and these are the same things, but they're over 2 slides. So as I go through the detail, I'm not going to give all the justification for each one. I'm just going to tell you where they show up, and therefore, John, I think they have those.
There we go. Thank
So, if we look at the bottom line and the totals, so there's a total of $121,480. That's the second column from the left to right. And those are things that are included in the base budget just because they're things we have to do. It's not like we have a lot of control over most of them. Or things like, well, the cost of heating oil is expected to go up, as an example. And that's not something that we have a lot to say about. And others of them in the first column, those are the levels of services things. These are some of the things that I talked about as I was talking through the discussion of the concerns about the budget. And then the third column those are things that we absolutely can justify, but didn't think fell in either of the first 2 columns. And then things furthest to the right, in the orangey color, those are things that were requested that we did not think that we could recommend at this time. So I'll go over, if you have the budget message, and I think most of you have the message now, there's a detailed reason for each of these things, all of the things on this list. And you can read that. I won't repeat it in the interest of time, but it's there. But I will mention where they each fall as we go through each section of the budget. Going back to the bottom line is the grand total of these requests, some of which are in the budget and some are not, is $1,737,259. So 1.7 million in new requests in one of those categories. Okay. So here's the total budget. And this one is not differentiated by regular ed, special ed, or vocational, but you also have that information. So if we look at the total percent of change, I mean, I don't like to look only at that, you all know that, but that's where many in this room want to look first. So the total budget is at a 6.1% increase overall. And those numbers down the left, which are account numbers, or we call them functions, we will be discussing all of those functions over the rest of tonight and the next 2 Thursday nights. And you can see out to the right the percentages of increase, and I know people tend to want to look at what are the big ones, and that's reasonable, and you should look at that, but remember that some of the big numbers are in a very small function, so the dollars aren't necessarily big, but relatively, the percentages may be. So we're going to be going over most of the things, starting with 1,100 up through 3,200 tonight. And then next week, we'll be doing special education and also the capital budget. And the third week, we'll be doing most of the functions that I call John's functions, the operational and facilities kinds of functions. So if you want to see what it looks like, if you break it down, you all have this one. And so the blue section is the regular education section, and that increase is 5.79%. And the green, the increase for that section is 6.61%. And the red, and this is what I mean when I say the big percentage isn't necessarily the big dollars, that increase is 77.21%, and the reason for that is that we have 4 youngsters now, and we have information that 3 youngsters have applied for a voc school, and we won't know that until around the first week or so in May, so we feel we have to include the numbers here. All of them could get in, none of them could get in. 4 more kids that we don't even know about now may decide to apply, and we would be responsible for their tuitions. I'm not afraid of that happening realistically, but just know that we know only that we have 4 kids now, and we have some potential for others. So looking then at the big picture, it's still, of course, the 6.10%, and if you look at the actual size of the budget request, the preliminary proposed budget, $52,800,171, and that it's $3 million increase, $3,037,474 over last year, and not very different in terms of dollars, right, John, from last year's request at this.
When we started,
at this
yeah,
point.
right, yeah.
It's pretty close. But this does represent some things that we had to reluctantly not recommend being funded, although school committee always has the option to feel differently about that. So in terms of a more visual approach, so this is the school committee by program areas, and the biggest chunk there is regular education, regular instruction, that big blue chunk on the left. About a quarter, almost a quarter of the budget is special education, so that's a $12.6 million request, and it's 24, I think it's actually 23.9% or 24% of the budget. That's all of the functions of special education. And then you can see all of the smaller chunks. Custodial, maintenance, utilities, no, not a lot of discussion about those. A lot of those things are just things that we just need to do. Principals' offices, now that doesn't mean the physical office, but the materials and the staffing that we need at the principal's level, clerical staff, salaries, some amount of supplies and other things. Counseling and health, they're broken out from regular instruction. That's why the blue chunk is not labeled. I label it as general education, but it really isn't. It's really regular instruction as opposed to other kinds of support positions like counselors and nurses and so on. Transportation is a pretty small piece, even though we think it's a big number in our budget. It is. It's over $1 million. It's up 2% though, which is a modest increase. Small piece of the pie. The next blue one is central office, and again, that's not the offices per se, but everything that goes on here in salaries, the clerical support, and all the things we need to run operations here. And the pink part is, oh no, the blue is the, which way do we have? School committee, yeah, and central office. And the pink is student activities and athletics, and the green is student athletics. I'm better off reading them here. Vocational is the green, athletics is the pink, and school committee and central office combined is the light blue color. So And this is a different graph. If you look at things according to just 3 categories, because you can break up the budget in all sorts of ways, but if you break it up into only 3 categories, personnel, contracts, and other, you can see that the one that's growing the most, and you have to read this graph from right to left over time, that obviously the personnel costs are the ones that are growing the fastest. That the red, which are contracts, and that would be things like tuitions would come under that in terms of contracts. So that's pretty stable number over time. And then the green is all other things. And I'm struck with not just the fact that it's been fairly stable, but how little we really have control over in the budget. Now, we have control over personnel, certainly, because we can simply say we won't hire people, or we won't keep as many, or we won't add people. So we have that kind of control. We don't have much control over the red part. Those are contracts that we have with other people and other agencies. Mm-hmm. And the green is where we can really wield our, hopeful thinking and all of that, but it's not really very much in the grand scheme of things. And this is a chart that reflects that prior category of personnel costs and tuitions. Those are under contracts and contracted services, and then the utilities and the heat and the buses and all of that. So this is now the part of the budget that each of those is. And the very top line, furthest number to the right, is that I can remember, and it's not very long ago, when that number was like, 70-something%, and now it's 83.27% is personnel costs. Not just teaching, but all the various personnel that we have. Because while the teaching component is the biggest component and the fastest growing, we have a large number, for example, of paras. So if you're looking at how many people, that's a pretty big chunk. Just about half of what we have as teachers. So anyway, those are the ways we can look at the budget. You can slice it in a lot of ways, but however you slice it, this preliminary proposed budget is a 6.10 budget, and it's a little more than $3 million more than last year, and the total amount is $52,800,172. And so we've got about a month, really, before we have to come to the point where the school committee talks about what it wants to adopt as a budget, and where both the selectmen and the advisory committee need to weigh in. And in between there, that will be together in this room a lot of time over the next month or so. So this is another visual, but this one is the whole special ed budget, like the entire piece of it. And you can see that teaching services is the blue chunk, and that's 62% of it. 2/3 of this budget is in actual teaching services in special ed. And so, of course, the teaching services are the services we provide here. So that the children that are housed, that are taught daily here, which is 500 and I'm going to guess 34 or something like that students in our district. And then there are 51 students that we're projecting next year will be going out. And that's it's been very stable over the last number of years, the number in out-of-district placements. And that is over $3 million, or it says here 25%. This also includes voc tech, so that's why it's 25 and not the 23.9. But those are kids in other settings, and transportation, which is both for voc tech and for special ed, is there, and then counseling functions that are in there as well. All of our elementary and secondary psychologist chairs are in this part of the budget. So That's the story there. So I need to go through those other functions, those 12, very quickly, and I'll, as I talk about them, mention where each of the new things falls, the ones that are in this category tonight. But are there any comments or questions on the PowerPoint first?
Anybody have any questions?
What was the thinking of including the vocational in with the special ed summary?
No particular, just to not have
Where
a
has
lot
it
of
been?
tiny slices of the pie. You know,
It's
occasionally
always been
not
there, Ed.
helpful.
It's like, I mean,
If we had a lot
we
more,
have different, we can slice this up any way anybody wants to look at it, you know?
and if
but-
we had a lot of vocational kids, it would make sense to that, it being a big part of our program, but it really isn't. It's not saying that the categories in terms of services or children are the same. The categories in terms of how money is spent are. And, you know, for possibly anywhere from 4 to 7 likely children, doesn't make sense to have a separate category.
It's not a lot of control over it, so.
Yeah, that's another reason that there's similarity. Good point.
Anybody else?
Anything else?
Any questions? Anybody from the audience? Okay.
Can we have the light man up there, button the light? Thanks, Derek. Okay, I'm going to close this down. But in your packet, you have the, what I call the meat of the detail of the budget. So I'm going to go through that section by section. Starting with the 1100 account. And the 1100 account is the school committee account, and I'm just going to focus as I go through these pages pretty quickly on what the overall increase in terms of percent is for that particular function, and also whether or not there's any, and what, anything new in there, or whether there's any number that seems to be a big percent that needs an explanation. So this is the school committee function. It covers our legal fees, it covers some minor supplies, and there's an amount of money in there for school committee to go to workshops or conferences, training, that kind of thing, miscellaneous category. So that increase is 42.12%, which sounds huge, like the school committee is really going to some faraway places. Believe me, that is not the case. It's up that amount for 2 reasons. One is our legal fees are fairly substantial, particularly in the last couple of years when we've been doing negotiations. So that's a number that will level off if we ever get our settlement with the bus drivers, but that will level off. The other is that there's an amount in there. It's no secret there are going to be some transitions in the next year or so, and 2 years, and we likely would need the services of someone who would be doing some search and perhaps some other helpful transitional planning. So that $20,000 out of a $80,000 budget is a big number. So that's one of those one-time costs, that things that we don't have to do very often, so that's the reason for the increase there. If you move over to administration, and this is central office administration, principals, buildings have another category. So that increase overall is 6.61%, so pretty reflective of the increase overall. We're in the 3rd year of all of the contracts in this office, so you see what the that total figure is. We have secretaries in this office, administrative assistants, and we have a fair number of them, 10 or so folks. And so this reflects their increases. We don't negotiate with the secretaries. We meet with them as an association, much in the same way we do when we negotiate. So this increase, this means the salaries that they would be having this year, assuming that we need to add 2 more years of negotiating onto that, the year that we're in, because we haven't settled with them yet totally. We have a kind of a handshake agreement.
Wait, this one's the, is the new personnel
Yeah,
piece.
and
the-
right, and in
and the
addition to
steps,
that.
And the steps, really.
Right, in that line is that while we haven't settled the full negotiation in terms of any kind of an across-the-board settlement with the secretaries, what this number reflects is the step that they would be getting in the current year and then in the following year. So it will reflect the step, but not yet the dollars. And it also reflects in there a half position, clerical position for this office. Because overall, over time, maybe the next 2 years, the administration has suggested, and the school committee, I think, has some consensus on this, that we really need another central office position here. We need a position of a human resources person or a personnel director. Many schools of our size have that kind of position. Right now, that function is being done partly by John, for some of the support personnel, by Jamie and me. Various aspects of what a resources person or personnel director would do are divided up, and Nancy Cronin, our payroll person. And so, thinking forward, we're hoping, and not asking for the role this year, that such a position will be in our near future, and that we can at least, and we would need an office for that, physically as well as in the sense of it being a role description. But it would need some support. So our thinking is to put into this budget the .5 person who can support some of the functions that we could turn over to such a person, and would be there so that in the next year, the school committee will likely request the personnel director role.
So that, the personnel director would be new for fiscal year 20,
Yes,
not 19.
19 is the personnel support.
this is 19.
Personnel support, right? The personnel director,
Okay, so
we've
then-
deferred that.
Right, but, so then this needs to be edited.
Well, yeah,
Oh.
there's no number there.
There's no number.
Yeah,
So
we
we
can
need
take
the
it out,
line
yeah.
for the half person, that's the 17,161,
Should be under 2.
Yes,
right?
17.
yeah, we
And
can
then-
we can
Right.
certainly take it out,
Yeah.
but I wanted to be able to explain where.
Right, but then the
it's in the
number
future.
3, the personnel director, it says new fiscal year 19,
Right, but there's no number beside it.
right.
Yeah.
So in the budget.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see
so
what you're
we
saying,
can-
the
we can
note.
So
change-
either-
we
Yeah,
can change
the note
note,
shouldn't be
yeah.
there regardless.
So the, well, we can leave the note in, but then it should be,
FY18.
the director would be fiscal year 20.
Yeah, and
For
there's
the
no number.
clerical staff,
Right. I mean,
It's
we just take
19.
the note out. This is just the first
Yeah.
thrust of the budget, but, so there's no
I-
number beside there. We
I understand.
changed it
No.
even after we started getting it going, so.
I get it. So well, for me, to keep track, it would be good to have the line of the half position in here with the 17,161 identified, like it is on
So not
this
grouped in with
one,
the others.
And then you can leave that personnel director as a
Wait.
What- but
You do
then it
have the
should
backup-
say-
Is the backup sheet there?
fiscal year 20.
Yeah, so you do have the backup sheet too, right? Okay.
Yeah.
You have the back,
Yeah,
There-
it's just on,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I'm now being picky, but on the 1100 sheet, we have the search expenses listed and the number, so it's called out. Then we're going to 1200, and that half a person is not called out. So
Anything that's new.
we should call
be
them out,
called out.
or we
It
should be
is in-
consistent in how we're presenting the information.
Okay. It is in the list of things
Yep.
that we're adding. so-
Yep.
But I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I thought last year in these line items, it was also called out each time when it was something. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I thought it was.
All right. And then the town has asked for us to pick up some additional costs from their office, their accounting office, if you will, and it mainly has to do with the additional work that's involved with Munis, some changes in Munis, but also the whole Medicare situation and the new health insurance situation. You remember they put a .5 position in, and this year to manage that kind of transition, and so we're being asked to pick up an additional amount, and that's the that is called out.
So that's so that's the difference between 47,633 and 36,750.
Right.
That's the only,
Those
Yeah.
are the munis charges, yeah, right.
so that's
And
the
then-
only, that change is all representing what we've been asked to contribute.
What we've been asked by the town to put in.
So then we should add that to this list?
And normal increases as well. I mean, these are just, I mean, it's not like a new thing, it's just as,
Yeah, and that's the difference between those two columns on the blue and white sheet, that one of the columns is for things that just have gone up and they're in the budget and they're not called out. Whereas the other column is new, additional, if you will, new items. Nobody likes to use that word initiatives because it sounds way too forward-thinking for what I think people want to perceive, but there are things that are in that second column that are in the budget because they're bigger numbers, but they're not a new kind of function.
But it would be nice to know, because nowhere is it identified how much of that increase between the 36,750 and the 47,633 is just what we're being asked by the town to contribute to Munis.
right, it's all, yeah, I mean, it's just the bill from Munis and their increase, and this is the portion.
That's
of it.
our share
We
of it.
have like a new, because we have content manager, we're implementing content manager, so there's a new recurring charge associated with content manager. For example, this year, we're planning on going for capital for time reporting. Next year, there'll be a recurring charge for time reporting of $6,000, and that number will rise by these new modules that we end up putting in. But it's not like it's not new to the budget, it's not like, it's part of the overall operations, the cost escalating for, the cost of software. Also down on this, if you look at number 6, we have audit fees. Those are up $5,000 because the plan is to call for an audit this year for the student activities account. Right, so,
But there's a category for audits, so.
but I mean, all these, few $1,000 items, I mean, there's a number of them in there, but, what's the stopping point, when do you highlight something that is significant relative to a change or something that is just part of a normal operation?
Okay, so this munis charge, the town added on $10,000 to us, or or did we have a regular cost of living increase?
No, it's I mean, a regular increase, here's the munis fees that are coming in for this year, and we get our allocation from
We
it.
pay munis
Right.
fee every year. We
Okay.
always have.
So
but-
this year it's just higher than it has
Right.
been in the past?
Well, their increase went up, plus we have content manager we're paying for now, too.
Right, so what are we paying for the content manager that we
Um,
weren't paying before?
Yeah, I don't, maybe $2,000-3,000, Aisha,
Oh.
do you remember?
The town manages the contract with Munis.
So the whole thing goes up about 5% or so, and then, you add a new module as we continue to automate, which is a recurring charge.
Okay.
The town did go up on fees as well for the overall network maintenance, but that's sitting in a different account. Not in this account.
Okay.
Yeah, we pay the town an amount for managing the technology for this building, for example, a piece of what their total cost is, because we share that resource.
But that's in 4,200, not here.
Yep.
So,
We're just looking at what's here. And then on number 6, the other, where it says audit fee, so the reason that went up is the student activities fund.
Yeah, they have to call for an audit, so, that should be,
So it's required, it's just
Yep.
that
yeah.
we,
I'm hoping
Postpone
5,000
it.
will cover it.
Yep.
okay. Moving on to 2,200, that's the principal's account, and that's up a modest amount. I would point out there, kind of one that's a little hard to understand. There are no new positions here, so there are increases, contractual increases, but no new positions. If you look at line 6, where you see a minus 20,037, and then that, John, why don't you explain? That has to do with the fact that we had a
Yeah,
desk visit.
Right. Last year, we had the NEASC assessment at the high school, and we knew that there would be additional expenses for that, for their lodging, their hotel, plus the increased fee in a recertification year. So that was an amount that we originally had in the budget. And, as we were going through our budget deliberations, and Dan, you may recall this, it said, is there any way, if that's a one-time fee, is there any way we could use one-time money to handle that? And the answer was yes. So what we did, that negative, that 20,037 you see, is an offset from building revolving, which was the account that we were planning to use to offset the NEASC. Now, those expenses went away, so now it just reverts to where it was previously.
We were talking toward the end of the budget that one-time things create a problem for us in terms of being in the budget year when they occur, being an increase, a percentage increase, which, complicates our ability to get other things that we need. So I think Dan made a very good suggestion of are there one-time things, and there are always a few, that we can offset in different ways. And so these are 2 offsets that have to do with the
Yeah, so you see in the bottom line, it went up like 2.66% because, we use that offset. But the total expenses in that year truly were that $35,000, You just don't see it in the operating budget. It's
Yeah, it has to
actually-
do with housing
it's actually
the
in a
team
different
from
fund.
Sunday through the end of the day on Wednesday and feeding them and paying their travel expenses. But in the year of a visit, they also double the annual dues or the annual fees for that year. So it's the 2 components of their being here and being on site. All right, 2,300 account is the biggest account in the regular ed section of the budget, and it's the personnel account. So one of the things that is here, well, let me start at the top. In terms of the teachers and the professional staff, there are 5.1, secondary teachers there. So we have not kept up with our teaching staff at the elementary, even though our enrollment has been going up. And some of you may say, well, but so now it's not going up, and so why do you need these teachers? Can't you get along with the same number? And I would say that the main reason we put this here is we've asked every year for additional secondary teachers. And much of that increase is because we have done what I believe the school committee wants and what this community wants, and things like putting in technology, technology services for kids. So you all heard about the Tech Squad and how great that is, and what wonderful things they do in the building as well as for kids. Well, that Tech Squad teacher we put in place by reducing math staffing, because that's where the certification is. So I would argue that we can't continue to borrow core subject teachers to do these new things that everybody wants. I mean, I hear a lot from our school committee particularly that some of them believe that we're way behind in technology, and I would say would be even behind her if we didn't put in place the tech squad and the help desk and the courses that Sarah teaches, because Sarah is a math teacher, a very good math teacher. We have a similar situation, for example, and now we're teaching computer science. Why? Because there's an expectation at the state level as well as locally that computer science is going to become a part of the core for the state. We need to teach it. Well, our only certified person, licensed person anyway, who could teach that course is another math teacher. And of course, once you teach one of those courses, then the numbers go up in another year. And so in a sense, that's borrowed staffing. We can make the same argument about science, for example. We have a wonderful STEM program at the middle school, and it's a great program. But who's teaching that? Someone that was hired to be a math and science teacher. We can give another example in science in terms of we have a greenhouse. Well, if you have a greenhouse, you should be offering a botany course or something related to that, perhaps a different title. Well, where does that come from? That comes from someone who we borrowed initially just a period of biology teaching to fund that. So that's why I feel comfortable putting these positions in here, partly because we can't go on forever with level staffing when other, not just numbers of kids come along, but needs for courses come along as well. So there are 5.1, and they're pieces of people in most cases. As you can see, the actual 5.1 is 2/10 of an art teacher for the middle school, 2/10 of a Chinese teacher for the high school, 7/10 of English teaching, a math teacher, and 2 science teachers. Now, I will say that more than 5.1 FTEs of requests were put in. And so the others appear in another place on that chart that we kind of color highlighted. So they were all listed there, but look in 2 columns because you'll find the ones that were not moved forward in level services. In addition, in that category, there is the 1 kindergarten teacher, which possibly could come out, depending on the numbers and where they fall. And also in there is 1 Plymouth River classroom teacher that, again, depending upon where the numbers are when we make the decision the 1st of May, we may need that, we may not. So those 2 have a iffiness about them, if you will. Also in there, we put the elementary tutors, the math tutors. And why is that there? Well, this is the 5th year we have requested those tutors. The 5th year. Now, we have good core instruction at the elementary level. Teachers do a great job. We're led and supported by our 2 math specialists. We need 1 for each school, but didn't recommend funding those 2 positions. We are recommending funding the tutors. You know, every year we, as we look at test results in particular, you know, we look at where we need more support, and we have pretty well supported for literacy specialists in each building. But when we write the plans that we sometimes are required to write, and sometimes we choose to write to remediate in terms of things like MCAS, we need more help because some kids need more help, more time on task, if you will. And so given that, and given that we've asked for it for all these years, we did put that in under level services. Because 5 years of requests, and we simply can't do what we've been doing, which is in a sense ignoring the problem in some way of thinking about it. So that is in there as well, and it would be 2 tutors at each of the 4 schools, and they would work 25 hours a week, and they would work under the supervision of the math specialist. So also in here, if you look way over to the right, there's that $600,000 offset. That is the teacher piece of the full-day kindergarten. And if you look down to Object 3, and you see the minus 200,000, the first year we put these offsets in both the regular ed budget and the special ed, and we tried to divide them up somewhat arbitrarily. We decided that they're supporting kids that are not in a self-contained class, but they're all kids. So all of the offsets now are on this page. And some of them are in Object 1, which is teachers, and some are in Object 3, which is the support staff. Let's see, what else? I think that's it in terms of explaining all of these things, but you can see that it is a big increase here, and this is one of the parts of the budget that increases each year more, and again, it's because of the contracts and the rate of growth of the personnel costs, and in particular the salary pieces. So that overall rate is 7.12%. But it's 7.1 teachers, elementary and secondary. It's the tutors, and then just the comment about where the offset is for the full day K tuition.
So can we get this edited so you have the math tutors bolded, but can you pull out the elementary teachers and the secondary teachers in the same way that are level services and in the budget?
Okay.
So that we can see
Yeah.
the general run rate of the contractual existing salaries and professionals, and then see the added ones too.
So then you would do the same thing for the 7.1?
This budget would get, it will just
No, that's not what I meant.
exponentially
Nope.
grow. I mean, we put on the detail sheet, but
I'll show you afterwards what I want, okay? I don't want to talk about it now, I'll show you later. It's too hard to explain across the tables, so, okay. Anybody else have any questions?
2,300?
No, I see what you've done. I think what's happened is this used to be there last year, but instead of putting it in here, now, we didn't used to have these sheets. We've never had this before, so.
We did last year, but it was in a different place. Okay. 2,350 is professional development. That's the function Jamie has.
Can I talk about it?
Yeah.
Hi. The professional development, again, it's to run, we have, as you know, mandated trainings that we're required to do annually, as well as continue the work to get more and more of our teachers certified as sheltered English immersion educators as part of the ELL work, as well as running our professional development program, graduate courses, et cetera. And so there's not, there's a modest increase, I believe 1.86%, to go along with the training that we're requesting.
And we're fortunate in that we've had some support from some other sources. So I make a comment on that sheet about concerns that that's a growing cost. It is a growing cost, and what's in this budget wouldn't make you think it's a growing cost. But, you know, Jamie's been particularly effective in some partnerships with, you know, BU in terms of the HTSS stuff, and with the Hingham Foundation in terms of the science and the STEM initiatives. So I put it there because that is a cost that is continuing to grow, but it is not a huge increase in our dollars because we've had dollars from other places. Although we've lost some dollars that we use for professional ed, in special education in particular. They're smaller federal grants, but they're just gone. So.
This is also where our mentoring and induction program is funded. I mean, there's other pieces to it, but this, it gives you a sense of what.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The mentoring and induction plan, you know, we used to simply have to provide mentoring for our incoming teachers. Well, now, teachers have to go through a formal mentoring plan in their first year in order to maintain their license or to get to the ultimate license of professional status. And they have to accumulate an additional number of hours in the 2 years after their first year. And so, you know, we have to provide some programs to enable them to do that. All right? So, 10, did we miss 2,400? It's textbooks.
I don't. I have it next. I have it, it's the next page. Going the other way.
Hmm?
Let me go through this.
Yeah, this is 2,400 textbooks.
Yep. So you also have the textbook request, which was funneled from our core content directors to the principals and then to the core budget, which encompasses ensuring that our students have up-to-date materials and textbooks and supplies. Does this include the addition of the social emotional?
Yes.
Yeah. It also includes a roughly, do you know how much that was? It's on the outside. Is it?
35,000 or something?
Part of the reason it might look like a big increase, there is a roughly $35,000 increase, $35,982 to this budget to cover the cost of Tier 1 education and materials for our social and emotional work. So right now, we don't have a core social emotional program that is instructed in sort of any of the grade spans. And so part of the work through social and emotional, the Hingham Tier System of Support is to put in place a strong Tier 1 sort of education program. And so that is the projected cost for a program K-12. And that, again, that was the 35.9, which is why the increase looks to be 16%.
And that's a one-time cost, or is that going to be a recurring cost?
It will likely be a recurring cost.
But not annual.
It won't be to that level. The first time we purchase, for example, we have to buy the teacher text.
This is the
but we will-
initial investment.
Correct. There will be some ongoing cost, but it will not be a 16% increase annually.
Is that cost broken up? Oh, that's all in the textbooks.
Yeah, so we would pull that out again.
Okay.
Is that in the 215?
That's what I was asking. That's
Yeah.
in line item 5, obviously, because it must be. Is it split between the elementary and
Yes.
secondary?
It
Yes,
is.
it is.
There's an elementary cost and a secondary cost.
Yeah.
So you want us to break that out?
No, I'm just asking.
Hmm?
I was just asking if it was.
No, I'm assuming that you want that broken out.
It is broken out already.
I'll talk to you about what I.
Okay.
I'll talk.
2450 is instructional technology, so that includes Joe Andrews and Karen Condon at the middle school. It includes our elementary tech specialists. There are 4 of them, and it includes some tech assistants, such as covering the high school non-dedicated lab where kids can go to do some work. And the new elementary tech specialists that we hired, and from everything I hear, really exceeding our expectations. And so we've given some additional funding there because we need to keep this very talented young person and help them grow within our system. It's not being paid an extraordinary amount, that's for sure, but that was a wonderful asset, and he was an asset, and the role is much appreciated, so we're happy about that. So in terms of in this budget, there are no new positions. So the increases that would seem to be larger increases, individual things, are some increase in pay for Colin. A request that we had actually by a person who is leaving us as an employee for some additional support for the middle school language lab. And that has been probably a 3-year request, and really is justified that when you have middle school age students in the language lab, regularly assigned, yes, there's a teacher there, and she's teaching the lessons, don't always see the tugging at the cords and the kinds of things that go on that make the life of our equipment not maybe what it could be. So we need some additional support in that lab for supervision, number one, and number two, for helping to get well used, to have ready after one class and for the next class coming in. Remember, the middle school, excuse me, class periods are 46, 47 minutes long, not an hour, so you don't want to lose time. And so and what we have been doing is sharing some of the hours of the high school person. But we don't have exactly the same issues at the high school, but we do have the concern about the equipment being kept in good shape and ready for use and so on. So that is in there as in the new initiative category, so to speak. And we have the data specialist at the high school. That was a person that was going to be a data specialist for the district in terms of our own use. And virtually her entire job is working for the state. And every time we turn around, they add a new requirement, sending in counts, and they manage the state student system, student information system. They manage the teacher information system. They manage all of the teacher responsibilities, the classes that are taught, how many students there are, all of the things that we have to keep track of in terms of MCAS testing and all of that. So that job has grown. It is an individual contract growth, so that that salary has been increased, but there are no new positions and no other really unusual increases here. So 4.19% overall.
So, okay. So this, under number 3, the student database specialist, that looks like is that an extraordinary increase for that?
I wouldn't say it's
salary, or
necessarily
is it-
extraordinary for an individual,
Yes, that doesn't look
position.
like it.
That's the first one.
Right.
And do you
The
mean the
56.
technology assistants?
Then the technology assistants, that's the
Right.
language, the middle school language lab
Is included
person.
in that number, that's correct.
Which on this one, it's under 2,300, just FYI, on this sheet.
Yeah, it is.
Good catch.
And then, okay, and then the elementary tech assistant, we're making that a full-time?
Well, it's been really a full-time, it's more than a year-long job. And it's 7 hours a day, John? What is the number of hours per day?
We're increasing his hours?
We're in.
For what's that? For?
Colin.
Oh, yeah, 7 hours a day. 7 hours a day, 261, he's a full-time. Yeah.
Yeah, but we've increased his pay,
Yes.
yes. That was the
Right,
question.
we've
right?
increased his pay, he's the 261 days a year employee, you know, that was getting paid as a tech assistant. So he's 7 hours a day split between 4 elementaries.
Right, but do we upgrade his role, or is it just a standard increase?
For Colin, no, we're recommending a greater increase
Okay.
because of performance. When we started him off, we started off as a tech
I'm not
assistant.
proposing not doing it.
Yep.
I completely agree that it is very valued and needed. I'm just trying to keep track of where the changes are. Okay.
John, it looks like the online subscriptions have been doubling the last few years. Is that something that is expected to continue? Do you have any idea?
I think Some of it's me jockeying between positions. I mean, when you look at the bottom line, I think the bottom line stayed fairly consistent, but last year we did have a big jump because Microsoft and Adobe, they all changed the way they did business. Before you'd buy a CD and you could load computers, now it's all downloaded online and you get charged for every single one. That was, that's what we picked that up actually 2 years ago.
Okay.
Last year was the first year I got into the budget. And then this year, I look at the expenses and I'm saying, okay, where does that one fit? Is that a maintenance thing? Is that a subscription? So I've tried to, and it still is it's a moving target. I still try to like map it into the closest category that I can get. But I think on a bottom line, we stayed fairly consistent at about 136 for that, I think.
I think we finally kind of
So I'll shuffle between those categories, Cynthia, to see if I can. It's about the same money, but I want to like get it classified correctly. So it ends up ultimately getting booked correctly in the accounts.
And also stabilized what belongs in the technology budget because it's more of a district kind of need, and what belongs in the individual department textbook budget because it's a very specific kind of part of the program or support for the program. Okay. All right, 2,500 is the library. It's 2.89% overall. There are no new positions here. We will check on the cable grant has offset the TV production teaching on that for a number of years. We always check to see if that's still something we can count on, but it's in here, and that's the minus 18,000. So it supports some of the TV production teaching, not all of those classes, but some of it. And 2,700. So let me just say something in general about 2,700 and 2,800. So in the 2,700 budget, regular ed part of the budget, that includes all of our guidance counselors. So there are guidance counselors 6 at the high school, but one of those is a person who has a partial load and still continues to run the post-secondary section. And so she's in a different, on the backup page, she's down below. And that's there because it's not a person with a full load, but she's paid as a counselor, and she does have a partial load. But she continues to do what she did before when she was a tutor. And then there are 5 other counselors and Heather, who is the director. At the middle school, there have been 3 counselors, and we've had, I think, 5 years of requests for a 4th counselor, which we certainly can manage. Can't manage without much longer, and a lot of that has to do with things like the increase in social emotional concerns there. So these are real concerns. It's not so much more kids. We've had more kids for a long time, but it really is more the kinds of services that kids need. But Derek also requested a second adjustment counselor. And certainly the numbers of kids that we have, and for similar reasons as with the counseling, we also requested an adjustment counselor, a second one. So as we're wrestling, we felt we can justify both. We think given all the other requests that we have, we couldn't put both of them into this already pretty big budget. So we put in the guidance counselor here. But our thinking is that as the spring goes on, and we hear the results of the survey that was done for the social emotional task force, that we would leave it to Derek and Heather, really, to think about this and say, of the 2 things, the guidance counselor and the adjustment counselor, which one is the one that the 2 of you think will serve your population in the best way. So that's why it appears on the other sheet that it's one or the other. Makes that clear. But here, we had to put it in on a particular page in this budget book. So that is there, the additional counselor. So it would be the fourth counselor here. That's the way to go. And it's there. And that's the reason that function increased, and the overall budget here has increased as well. That's the main function there. I would point out, because I know we're going to have a discussion at some point later about transition program in general and so on, that we have one at each building. They work the full day at each building. They're both paid at a tutor rate. But this is where those two roles live. So 2,700 counseling is guidance counseling. We don't have elementary guidance counselors, so it's the middle and the high school counselors. Okay, on that.
So with that, are they about the same?
Well, the middle school one is 6 hours a day, and the high school one is...
No, I meant the decision to be made later between the guidance and the adjustment. Or is that, you put the guidance in, and if it's here, I apologize, I haven't examined this, but is the salary about the same?
The assumption
It's
for salary is
a
the
teacher
same.
contract.
Okay,
So-
all right.
So whatever it is that we get.
It's
Is it
assumed
there?
that master's 5, so it's in the...
Okay.
Now, the 2,800 account is for the adjustment counselors. All 6 of them are here. And you will see here that the high school also asked for another adjustment counselor, and the numbers there justify it, and we can justify it, and so we did put that request in here. So that's why we would then have a total of the 6 that we now have, and the one new one.
I'm sorry,
Didn't mention anything here on this page about a middle school one, because that's an either or, but we did put that on the blue and white sheet.
Where is that on this list?
So, this is the important thing. It's on the,
Where is it on this list?
There's one on 2,700 and there's one on 2,800.
Yeah, but those were the middle school.
2,700 is
There's-
counselors,
700 is
guidance, middle
counselors, so the
school.
middle school counselor is there. 2,800 is adjustment counselors, and so the high school adjustment counselor request is there.
And the 1.0 for the middle school is deferred. See, there's 2 lines there,
I
there's one in
see. I
deferred.
got it.
Okay, they're both on the same line.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, because you're asking for a guidance counselor and an adjustment counselor at the middle school.
Right. I should have,
Deferred
I
one.
tried to put this to
Okay,
one
I
sheet.
get
What
it,
I
yeah.
should do is just make many, many sheets, and
I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt, but I just
no,
tried
no,
to
no, that's
follow,
okay.
so thank you.
that's why, I mean, something.
But in the special ed part of the budget, which is the part of the budget has the Bs, there is a 2,700B account, and there's a 2,800B account. So when we get there, but just so you understand that they're in both places, under the 2,700B account, in the special ed section, that's where our elementary psychologist chairs are. So we don't have elementary guidance counselors, so they're there. And under the 2,800B account are the secondary psychologist chairs, and there are 3 of them, one in each building and a shared one. So those functions, counseling kinds of functions, are divided up between regular ed and special ed. And we've always said that the adjustment counselors are what we always call the regular ed service. Now, what we mean by that, general ed service, they're open to anybody. So do some children with special needs have support from adjustment counselors? Well, sure they do. But that's why we put them in, if you look at regular ed and special ed, we have counseling and we have adjustment support in both categories. And so we kind of divided them arbitrarily, if you will. I mean, we could have had a category of putting the elementary adjustment counselors in the in the special ed part of the budget, but they don't function just with children with special needs. So just know that you're going to see these terms before, but they cover different categories of people, and they're pretty well defined. So anyway, the major increase there is for the high school adjustment counselor role. And then the almost last section, the health services, that's all of our nurses, and we now have 8 nurses, because remember we added a second nurse for each of the secondary schools, and that was really a lot of need, but also a mandate from the Department of Public Health, who said that in terms of numbers and guidelines and so on, we need 2 dually certified nurses. That means not just RNs, because we always had, not always, but in recent years, we've had 2 RNs at each of those buildings. But that did not satisfy the Department of Public Health. So the other new cost here is for something we talked about just about a week ago, and that is that when the new opioid prevention law was enacted about 2 years ago now, one of the provisions of it was that schools should provide a screening, a verbal screening for all children at A grade in elementary school, and that would be middle school, grade 7, and 1 in high school, which would be for us grade 9. And each of those grades this year has about 350 to 360 students, and that we are expected to do a verbal screening looking for children at risk. For a long time, actually since the inception of the law, the Attorney General has said this is an unfunded mandate because there were no dollars that went with our needing to provide that service. And so the advice that we had from the DESE was it's an unfunded mandate and therefore you don't need to fund it. But the law had a provision in it that perhaps could have been written in a better or different way. It said that because it said that funding needed to be provided, and it didn't define who would provide the funding, and it didn't provide who would get the funding. So after 2 years of waiting for a decision on what was going to happen here, the decision came this year, and the Department of Public Health was given funding, a very small amount of funding. And they went to court to allege that because funding was provided, not to us, but funding was provided, that it no longer could be considered an unfunded mandate. And in fact, we had to comply. And this is, by law, by the end of this year, is the first year of that screening taking place. And so the only way we can accommodate that screening is to provide some hours of substitute nurse help. At the middle school, we estimated about 4 weeks of work, and at the high school, similarly, 4 weeks or so to screen students. And so we put that cost here, but it is a mandate. We have to pay for it this year. We've got to find $6,000 or so to pay for it this year, but we have to put it in the budget for the next year. Now, there is a great reality. Most of you in this room have lived here a long time and kind of know the thinking of some of our parents. Parents can opt out of this survey being given to their students. We have to provide information to parents. We've got some sample letters. In fact, the nurses met today. Department of Public Health used their money for training of nurses. Our nurses were trained earlier at the end of the year, the semester, so they're trained, and today they were meeting about procedurally what are the things we have to do. But one of the things we have to do is to send a letter to parents explaining this and saying you have the right to opt out. We also have to provide information about the survey, what will be asked, and so on. And my thinking is that in this community, just as what happened with the BMI, the body mass testing, and the letters going home to parents saying that their children were obese and so on, there was a lot of pushback to that. And people didn't have an opportunity to opt out. But I do think that many parents here will opt out, thinking about things like confidentiality and concerns about that. It is supposed to be a confidential process, but I can see that parents would be concerned about that, about privacy and so on. So it could turn out that we don't need quite as much substitute nursing support because we may not have as many parents who will allow that testing. Data has to be turned into the Department of Public Health, and that's really their interest in it, data. But there are lots of implications of this, so it's there, and it's no longer an unfunded mandate, it just is a mandate. So the only other section is the 5100, and I'm not even going to turn to that page, but that's the page where teachers who give us a year's notice receive a benefit, a contractual benefit. And teachers who retire with more than 100 days of sick time, accrued sick time on the books, which can be paid for those at the rate of $10 a day, but it is an amount. So that account, that 5100 account, is there to fund that. It's a small number this year, a smaller number, because we only have 2 known retirements at this point, and nobody else can give us 1 year of notice because we're well past that, so that's not going to grow at all. And it shows up as a decrease, a small decrease, because last year we had more known retirements at this point. So that's it for the functions for tonight. And next week, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing the special ed functions.
Thursday,
That's this week.
Thursday.
Thursday, I'm
Thursday.
sorry. This is next week.
Just a matter of hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
A matter of hours.
Well, on the 4th, if we'd done this on the 4th, then we'd be
That's
next
right.
week. So you're right. It's Thursday night, and that will be other kinds of functions, special ed, but particularly in talking about capital, because long-range planning goes to capital on
17th.
the 17th, and so we wanted for the entire school committee to be able to hear what long range is recommending to capital. And so we flip-flopped those 2 meetings earlier when we put the schedule together. And then the third meeting on the 18th, that will be mostly John's functions, running the buildings and transportation, student activities, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So that's it.
Any other questions for now? No? Anybody have questions for now? Okay. Thank you. So we will continue that on Thursday. 7.3, to discuss the scope of proposals from Stackr Discovery Project, Communications Technology, and act as appropriate. This is to, we'll take a moment. Please feel free to, you all have to
Good
get up early in
night.
the morning and go to work.
We should feel free now.
Okay, so this Stackr discussion is a continuation of a previous discussion we've had, and this is community outreach. So, Kay, I will let you fill us in on, and make a if you guys can make a recommendation.
Sure. So we had Stackr come and visit us, and they gave a presentation basically to discuss what they call their discovery period, which would allow us to research really from the community, getting feedback from parents, teachers, residents of the community, anyone that might use our website, and to find out whether we need to change it, ramp it up maybe some, what kind of information is maybe missing, or do we need a completely new website? So the idea is to do this discovery period with Stackr. And they've given us 3 proposals, and their 3 proposals are in your packet, and they are basically based on hours. They just charge for hours, and they wanted to find out from us what our budget was. So you spoke to them, I believe, Dr. Jamie.
Yes. So we reached out and sort of at the last conversation, the committee, where there was a willingness to sort of entertain a proposal, we got in touch and said, could you construct for us sort of at 3 different price points what a different proposal could be. The other thing I will mention is that you also have the ability, well, can we do another hour of this and less of that? That can all happen as well. But we just wanted to begin to pull together to have you have some sense of what the price points would be and what the associated activities would be for those price points. So that's.
I think we said our budget was 8,000.
We have up to 8,000.
That was, okay. So and we haven't discussed this as a committee, but my first gut reaction would be kind of the medium discovery, just because they're basing this on 150 responses. And I really think that we will get a lot more response back from the community, which will obviously take them more time to go through. So it's really not going to take them maybe the projected 35 hours. It's probably going to be a lot higher. So in order to stay within the budget, I would rather take kind of the middle road, maybe to play it safe, that we don't exceed the amount. Because I really do think with social media, now that we have our own Facebook page, we've seen that we've had great outreach, and I think that with this outreach here, we could be just as successful.
I would suggest, I would like to see them meet with that category of the tech people. In the 3rd proposal, there was a 2-hour block.
Focus group thing.
Yeah, focus group.
Got to,
Yeah.
But
Webmaster
it
focus
seemed
group.
like we could do some mixed matching like that and just move that 2 hours into the other. So I ask you to consider that.
Yeah, it might make sense to do like one student focus group and then the one webmaster student focus group, because I don't know how much students really use the website. But I think it would be valuable to get the teacher feedback. Do you think?
This isn't just for website though,
Oh.
is it?
Yeah. Okay.
This isn't just for website, is it? It's sort of like how we should be
It's-
communicating.
yes, so is it to gauge us really, how much is our website being used? Is it really the tool that parents go to nowadays for their information? Or, because it may not, and that was kind of the key of why we were doing this discovery period, was, does it make sense for us to invest in a new website if no one's really using it? If people are using other sources or other tools to get their information. So that's what we want to find out before we spend any money on a new website, just to find out how are people getting their information.
And could this also help with the goal of looking at with the teachers of the platform and maybe integrating a little bit of that? Or maybe once we go through this, add on an hour with them to help with that goal of, what are the platforms we use? Maybe that makes sense.
We can certainly share it, what kind of feedback we get.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should do the medium discovery.
And we can,
And they're allotting a lot of time to these telephone interviews.
look at this.
Cynthia showed me how to enlarge it.
I got it.
Okay, yeah, believe me, I could, like the first time.
I thought I printed this out.
They're allotting 6 hours to a sample of 18 phone interviews. And to be honest with you, I think in this town, if they offer focus groups, people are gonna show up. So maybe we don't need so many phone interviews. I'd like them to do the focus groups first, if that can be arranged, to determine whether we even need telephone. I mean, 18 telephone interviews, that's not really,
And again, the price, at the end of the day, their price is based on how many hours they
right.
spend.
And they've allotted
So-
6 hours for phone interviews.
So we can
Maybe
easily
we
cut
don't
that.
even need phone interviews, and we could use that time,
Well, maybe that's where you do your webmaster.
yeah. You know, if we could do a little bit more à la carte choosing.
That's what I was wondering, can you?
Oh,
I
we
just-
can. We can.
Okay, so
I
we'll
would
take
think-
one from column A.
And I just don't think phone interviews are gonna be that valuable if they're gonna run focus groups, because like I say, I think in this town, people will show up for that. And so, let's see if we can get them to do the focus groups first, and if there's a good enough turnout, say, yeah, we don't need 18 telephone interviews, they're not gonna give us that much more information.
I
Whoever
agree,
they
I
are, the
agree with you.
experts.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to just randomly say you shouldn't do this, because there may be a good reason for doing a phone interview. Maybe people say something on the phone like they do online because you're not looking at them.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Or you're getting the people who've never come out.
Right, yeah,
I
exactly.
suppose that's true too.
And they did communicate to us that they are willing to sort of take I sort of forced their hand and said, okay, what would 3 proposals look like at 3 different price points?
Yeah.
Just so we could get some sense, but they did say if you want to mix and match or have less of this and more of that, that's all helpful feedback to them. So they would sort of tailor the discovery process to be what the community outreach sort of group wanted.
And Dot, I'm sorry, I was searching for a hard copy and I didn't have one. What was it that you liked out of the?
The webmasters, what they call the webmasters, and we could define, I'm sure, that group, and it's in the 3rd proposal
this one.
Yes,
as a
okay.
2-hour block.
Oh, the one webmaster focus group, and they have only 2 hours for that.
That's probably enough time. Who wants to sit for more than 2 hours?
So, would maybe we have them draw up a work, what do you call it, a work report or a work,
Scope?
Scope of services.
Probably a scope of service.
something like that?
Yeah.
And then we take a vote on it based on the discussion today, or how do
Can
we?
we vote on, like, up to a certain amount of money today, and that's it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm happy voting on an up to and leaving some of that nitty-gritty to the Community Outreach Committee. I don't think we all have to talk about every minutia of what they're gonna do. That's what your committee works on, and so have at it.
Well, and I have faith in this company.
Yeah.
I think that they will know from the size of our district and what they've heard from us. They too, I think we need to also trust their professionalism and expertise. All right, so then I'll go ahead and make a motion to pursue a medium discovery with Stackr for a discovery period up to the amount of $8,000. Is that, or do we want to, what amount do we want to set?
Yeah, not to exceed.
Not to exceed 8,000. I
Not
mean,
to-
if you can get them to do something for less, great, but then you don't have to come back to us if it's gonna be a few $100s more, that's silly.
All right, so not to exceed 8,000, with a few additions, maybe just focus on the focus groups before the phone interviews, if we can eliminate those at all, and to add the one webmaster focus group. Did I hear a second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Then 7.4, to receive notification of the appointment of Gayle Shea, Family and Consumer Science teacher at Hingham High School. Welcome, Ms. Shea.
Well, she's not here yet.
Oh,
She's
well,
coming at the
January
end of
29th.
End of the semester.
We look forward to you joining us. And then to receive notification of the appointments of Jared Grimm, a paraeducator at Hingham Middle School, and he got to work 2 days and got a day off. And Kimberly Dacey, their evening custodian at Hingham Middle School, effective December 26th. Welcome to both of them. And then we had some resignations. Sarah McMahon, Kids in Action teacher, and Laura Davidson-Kennedy, lab technician. So,
Dr. Gayle, I was wondering what the lab technician at the high school and the middle school does do. What's the job description for the lab technician?
No, for the what?
What's the
Lab
job description? for
technician.
the lab
Oh,
technician?
it's the,
A gal who's,
she resigned.
The language lab?
this is how this whole thing occurred.
Oh.
The high school language lab
Language
person
lab.
who was spending some
It's not
time
somebody
at
with
the
test
middle
tubes.
school, she
I knew you
resigned,
were taking
and in the
that.
course of her, giving us some exit interview kinds of thoughts, she suggested that really we could use much more help than she can give, because she was only a she person. And that, I checked with Erica and said, and Erica pretty much said something to the effect of, I'd given up asking for that because for many years, it kind of goes back to when we originally got the language lab under a former director of foreign language. She wanted the lab, we provided the lab, and then I said, I know you're going to come back and ask for staffing. Oh, we'll be able to make do. Well, it's come up many times that we just need more people watching middle school kids.
I was just wondering if our chemistry department was growing leaps and
No,
bounds.
no,
and
no,
that-
we
that
have-
technique, yeah.
We
Okay.
have not had a language, a science lab person for a long, long time.
All right, subcommittee and project reports.
We don't have
Anything
48
different
hours,
than,
right?
oh, we don't have anything 48 hours?
Okay.
Anything we haven't heard tonight?
Well, I just want to say that 99 is reopening. They already reopened, so the Hingham Sport Partnership is doing a special event there where they gave some money to to them as a donation. And I had an opportunity to go to the restaurant last week, and it's awesome how they are promoting our kids.
Oh,
You know,
good.
with some of the
There for dinner
pictures.
tonight, with a big Harborman sign. with
Yeah.
all the
Yeah, they
pictures.
put
Unbelievable.
all those things
That's awesome.
away and
Yeah.
brought them out.
It's great. So if you have an opportunity, stop by Thursday, 7 p.m.
Oh,
We'll
great.
be here at our budget work
yeah.
session.
Catering.
Maybe I
Takeout.
want.
Yeah,
Maybe
we'll
I
be
want.
here and we
If you
won't
don't
be on
see me
TV.
here, you know where I am.
Yeah.
We'll call the 99 and ask.
Yeah.
Food.
Yeah.
Here's a bit of trivia.
That's right.
What sport got its initial funding from 99?
What sport at the Hingham High
Hingham High
School
School sport.
got its initial start with some funds
From
from
funds, though.
99?
Girls hockey,
Football.
ice hockey.
Good choice, though. No.
Wait a minute, now, wait a minute.
Softball?
It's gonna
Football.
be an oddball, so it's gonna be,
The sailing team.
Sailing. No, not sailing.
No.
Oh, girls soccer has a beautiful picture.
we give up.
Rowing.
Football has a beautiful
Rowing?
That's where we got, when rowing first, they, were going to have volunteers and,
Really, good for them.
but they needed some initial kind of seed money, and we had just received a grant, if you will, or a gift from the 99, and we said, that's where we can put that money. Small amount at the time, but that's
I was
the way
very
it's
happy to see a local business, the big as 99 supporting our
That's
schools.
great.
So.
Well, thank you to the 99.
Last thing, in policy this evening, we briefly discussed the transition room
Oh, okay.
reports, which were included in here. Bottom line, we were talking about, the reports seem to be very different, middle school to high school, and there's, just what is the transition room for? What is, how is our funding being used, what kind of kids are coming through it. So we're gonna have a bigger discussion about that,
That's good.
on Thursday.
Special ed, we had a subcommittee meeting last week, or no, a couple weeks ago, right before Christmas,
break.
yeah. And then there's a CPAC meeting on Wednesday. Dr. Gallo's gonna review the special ed budget with the parents so that they have they can ask questions. And we were supposed to have an update on the work plan last Thursday, but we got snowed out, so we haven't rescheduled that yet. So,
Jamie and Liz and I met this morning with a small group of parents who, of children with learning disabilities, particularly looking at how we might work with other kinds of service providers and perhaps get involved with a pilot at one of our nearby special ed schools, and we're going to follow up with that. We had a productive conversation, I think, and we will follow up with them further. And we did put that on the work plan before we had the
okay, yeah.
meeting. So it's there, but the meeting was this morning.
Okay. Anyone else?
Community outreach, next meeting is Monday, 29th at 11:15.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, 10, we have adjournment to executive session, not to return to open session for the purposes of approving minutes of the executive session of the school committee held on December 4th, 2017, and discussing strategies related to individual non-union contracts, the public discussions of which may be detrimental to the committee's bargaining position. Do I have a
So moved.
Second.
so moved and a second? Okay, all those in,
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
aye. Okay, thank you very much.